across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, Thursday night, I'm Duncan Barkes. This is Talk, the home of common sense. It's a place where the United Kingdom comes to talk. Ideally, talk common sense. And there's a lot of stuff going on here. If you're listening on DAB Plus digital radio, good to have you along. If you're listening on your smart speaker, also good to have you there. And if you're watching on YouTube, hello, I'm Duncan. I'm in for Peter Cardwell. I'm here through until 10 o'clock tonight. The only number you need is this number, 0344 499 1000. Why is that important? It's the opportunity for you to have your say on whatever you hear on Talk over the next 3 hours. You can call that number and we'll chat on the air. You can WhatsApp that number and send like a message and I'll read it out. And also you can voice note that number. So record a voice note, WhatsApp it in, and we'll play them out as well. That's how you get to have your say here on Talk, the home of common sense. 0344 499 1000 is the number that you need. Now, I've been knocking around radio stations and studios for many, many years, and there is one debate that I have had many, many times over the decades. It's a debate about this country. It's a debate about justice in this country. And every once in a while, something happens in the world of crime. An horrendous crime, a heinous crime gets committed, and it causes me, and I'm going to be very candid with you this evening, it causes me to reevaluate what I think about things. Now, I don't want you to think that I'm some kind of pinko, liberal, bedwetter, right? I don't want you to think that. When I say I have decided that this country is probably better not having the death penalty. I reached that conclusion, I made that decision several years ago, predominantly driven by my view, which is the state should not have the legal right to kill its own people. That's kind of what drives my position, okay? And then every now and then something happens and I find myself thinking I have to reevaluate what I think about this country and whether or not in the future it should have the death penalty. And I'm being really honest with you tonight on Talk. This case, and I'm choosing my words carefully, upsets me greatly, and I know it would have upset you as well. People in my social circle have been very disturbed about what's been read out in court, and I'm not going to read a great deal out of what we discovered about the murder of this 13-month-old baby boy, Preston Davey, because it is horrendous. It involves the worst possible crimes ever committed against a defenceless young lad by an adult. Not any old adult, a man who was supposed to be caring for him as his foster parent. The child was physically abused, mentally abused, sexually abused, and I'm sorry to say it in this way, sexually violated as well. It's horrific. It's an awful case. There are questions that need to be asked and answers that need to be found from social services in the Blackpool area. And I'm sure when we get to hear more about the inquiry, we'll get a very real picture about maybe who should have done more at the time to save this little lad's life. What I want to talk about this evening on Talk is whether or not we need to look at having the ultimate deterrent in this country, which for me is the death penalty. Now, this teacher who sexually abused and murdered the 30-month-old baby boy has been sentenced today. He is going to prison for the rest of his life. They call it a whole life order. And it means that Jamie Varley, 37, will never leave prison, except in exceptional, compassionate circumstances. Is that enough? Has justice been done? This really, really shakes my belief that we should not have the death penalty in this country to the core. We used to have it in this country. It was suspended in 1965. It was permanently ended in 1969. The argument against even having the conversation about the death penalty is quite simply that we've had miscarriages of justice in the past. The list is pretty chunky. Guildford 4, Birmingham 6 are the obvious examples given. Men who were convicted of terrorism, of blowing bombs up that killed innocent people. And it turned out that the evidence used was very, very shaky. So people say, well, if you get miscarriages of justice, putting people in prison is one thing, killing them is another, particularly if they're innocent. So that's the argument. Can we have the honest conversation tonight here on Talk? 0344 499 1000. I accept this is a very extreme situation. This is a tragedy. There's a lot of speculation it could have been avoided if social services had done their jobs better, and we'll find out more about that over the next several months. But when you read about this case, and I'm sorry, you're going to read about it in great detail in tomorrow's newspapers, it is horrific, it is heartbreaking, it's tragic, and quite honestly, when I read about what happened here, I'm not convinced that a whole life order in prison is the answer. 0344 499 1000, because I'm wondering here whether or not, if we had the death penalty in this country, would it be enough of a deterrent to stop these kind of crimes? That is what I'm wondering, and I want you to tell me whether or not you think it might make a difference going forward in this country and stopping some of the most horrific crimes an adult can do to a child. 0344 499 1000 is the number, because I'm conflicted about this. I'm massively conflicted. I don't know what the answer is. I really don't. But when I read the details of this case, my heart breaks and I get angry, and I know you will be angry. And you find yourself thinking, well, maybe if we had the death penalty in this country, these kind of crimes would not happen. 0344 499 1000. Let's get a couple of views on this. Joining us on Talk on the Evening Exchange is Liam Cottrey, Executive Director at Mary Monson Solicitors, and investigative journalist and former prisoner David Shipley. Welcome both.
Stephen Duncan.
Thank you both for joining us. I'll go with you, Liam, first of all. I mean, clearly you've heard what I've had to say. It's in a very emotive case. I make no apologies for wanting to talk about it tonight on Talk, because I think it's important we have this debate. And extreme cases like this make people react in an extreme way, understandably. Is there any argument for a country to have the death penalty?
You asked the right questions, Duncan. Is the whole life sentence enough? No, it can never be enough. It can never be enough for society. It can never be enough for anyone who cared for this child. It could never be enough for the child itself. It's awful, horrific, like you say, horrific, heinous crime. You also ask about deterrent. Would it be a deterrent? Well, statistics suggest that death penalty is not a deterrent. Will it give retribution to anyone? Well, in any circumstances, to heal the murder, the killing, the violation of a loved one, a killing of another, I would suggest could never do that, could never fill that hole. In fact, philosophers argue that the anticipation of the death penalty alone is disproportionate to the offence that they may have caused. But then you talked about miscarriages of justice, and this is the one where every argument wins here. We only have to look at recent circumstance of Andrew Malkinson, 17 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit, and not murder. But the crime of rape is so incredibly serious. On this particular one, he had served 17 years, not finished his sentence. Yeah. A particularly horrific case. But of course, he didn't do it. And say he murdered or was accused of murdering that person, then not only would have an innocent man been killed, but we never would have known. He never would have appealed. Yeah. His solicitors wouldn't have done the work. Investigators wouldn't have done the work to discover the further DNA. I could go on. It's expensive. The Americans spend billions on death penalty cases where people don't even end up being executed. No. In the last 50 years, 130 inmates.
Okay, so convince me, Liam, go on and on. You could, and I appreciate your time so far this evening. Convince me and my listeners and my viewers here at Talk that that there is no other way of having such a deterrent that might stop these kinds of crimes happening. Because even if someone knows they're going to get the ultimate punishment in terms of life in prison, clearly that is not enough of a deterrent to stop these kinds of crimes, right? So are you utterly convinced that despite the whole life sentence, spending a whole life in prison, being in place, clearly that's not a deterrent, you are utterly convinced on the argument of potential miscarriages of justice that we should never have the death penalty back in this country?
Well, I didn't say that prison is not a deterrent. However, I do sway in that direction.
Okay.
In my experience, rehabilitation while within prison can help. Rehabilitation otherwise, community orders and so
Do
on.
you think everyone's able to be rehabilitated?
I think there's hope for all of us, Duncan. I think there are some people who are past rehabilitation. Okay. That's why whole life orders exist.
Understood. Let's bring in David Shipley on this. David, that's quite interesting. I saw your facial expression. Some of our viewers on YouTube might have clocked it as well. The idea that potentially there's hope for everyone to be rehabilitated. You kind of grimaced a little bit there. What's your take on this?
Yeah, look, I'm a Christian, and I do believe everyone is, I hope, capable of redemption, but that doesn't, I think, apply in terms of earthly justice. And we all agree. Liam was just saying that a whole life order isn't enough. It cannot possibly compensate for the horror of this crime or other similar crimes. The question is then, what should we do and why? And I think there's a mistake here. Actually, the value and the point of capital punishment is not necessarily to deter. It's actually about society saying, we are sending a moral signal. There are some crimes, such as the torture and sexual abuse of a child to the point they die, a baby to the point they die, which are utterly unforgivable, and the only appropriate response for a civilized nation is to hang those men. And Liam was talking about this great cost. Well, in the American system, that's true, but actually, if you look at when Britain had the death penalty, it wasn't expensive. Men like this would be hanged within a couple of weeks of being found guilty, having allowed time for an appeal. And the issue of, what if there are miscarriages of justice? The thing is, we could very easily define the death penalty as only applicable in certain circumstances. It might not even be necessarily the case every time someone takes a life. It could and should simply be for particularly sadistic crimes where guilt is in an absolute certainty and where there is no possible prospect of rehabilitation. So I'm thinking men like these two. People like Axel Ruda-Cabana, Wayne Couzens, these people who have committed appalling crimes, there's no question at all of their guilt. Of course, the right thing to do is to execute them, because the alternative is not cost-free. The alternative we have right now is we house very many men like this in high-security prisons, which are very dangerous and very violent. And lots of people in society, many viewers, sit there hoping that one day someone like Varley, this baby killer, will be killed by another prisoner. He may well be. But that's not a just or civilized way to do it. And actually, in doing that, we also create an environment where prison staff are at regular risk of assault and are often attacked by these people. So the argument in favour of the death penalty is often that, well, these days we can just permanently incapacitate people by putting them in prison, and that then they can't do any more crimes.
Yeah.
That's only a reasonable argument if you don't think that prison officers are people. Okay. And I'm afraid they are. Okay. And therefore, actually, rather than spending £100,000 a year for as many years it takes before someone like Varley is killed by another prisoner, we should just own our moral choice as a society, recognise that actually what we all will is the execution of men like this. And that is the right thing to do. And we should enact that in law and do it in a civilised fashion swiftly after conviction.
Okay. Liam, convince David that he's wrong.
A civilized society, David. A Christian education is something that I had as well. I think it was number 6 on those stone tablets that said, "Thou shalt not kill." I didn't realize we're specifically talking about hanging. Now, are we talking about hanging so the neck breaks immediately, or should we wait for them to...
Of course we're going to hang in the way so the neck breaks immediately in the professional way that we always did in Britain.
In the professional way, the civilized way.
Of course, we're not talking about anything that is egregious or cruel. It's a swift death done professionally, as it was for very, very many centuries in this country.
And the civilized society, when we later find out that they were in fact innocent, what do we do about those?
Well, I've already addressed that. So I said we would only have the death penalty in cases where guilt is beyond question. So Axel Ruda-Cabana, caught at the scene, these two men today who actually filmed their sexual abuse of this baby, where there is absolutely no question of doubt, and maybe we would have to allow juries the right to either convict on an absolute certainty or beyond reasonable doubt basis, but these are perfectly solvable problems. I'm not suggesting for a moment we should execute every single person who might once have committed a crime, but there are very reasonable ways of solving these problems, particularly in the era of DNA and ubiquitous CCTV. These arguments against the death penalty, I'm afraid, are 60 or 70 years out of date, and we can actually do this in an effective way now and not have these problems.
They're certainly not. We can't start adding different kinds of verdicts. It's hard enough
of course we can. Why not?
The system to cope in the system that it is now, and I will explain. If a jury is left with 2 verdicts that they can get, that is, in fact, only recently in Scotland, not proven, I think, was a third verdict a jury could give. And that's been
they've had that in Scotland for a very long time.
Because it's simply too complicated for a jury and there were miscarriages of justice. That's exactly the same thing that would happen here. Innocent people will die. And who will decide whether are we really going to put it in the hands of the jury in those circumstances to give the death penalty? Because that's effectively what you're doing, or certainly giving the judge opportunity to. It can't be.
No, we would be trusting the jury to decide guilt.
They can decide right and wrong. They can decide right and wrong, and they can decide guilt and innocence. But if you're giving them a third choice of definitely guilty, i.e., judge, you can execute this person if you want, it'll raise all sorts of different issues within a jury. You are telling that jury you have the power to allow a judge to execute this person. Again, it's just something that won't work. And you talk about
it worked for centuries.
And you talk about prison officers.
Capital crimes
you talk about prison officers. And I've read your article, in fact, in the Spectator. You talk and the totality of your argument within that article is that it's just too much trouble. Prison officers shouldn't have to deal with violence against sex offenders and
no. Sorry, forgive me. My argument is that prison officers do not deserve to operate in an environment where they are regularly assaulted and at risk of being killed by these very dangerous men in our dangerous prisons. It's not that they shouldn't be bothered. It's about the risk to the lives and physical safety of prison officers, and that is ignored so often in this debate.
I agree entirely, and I've been on this channel and others talking about more money required in the prison system and criminal justice system.
Money does not solve it. The reality is when you have...
It certainly does, because the prisons are overcrowded.
Sorry, our high security and long-term estate isn't overcrowded. That's not the case at all. The issue in the high security and long-term estate has nothing to do with overcrowding. It's a common misconception amongst people who don't really understand the prison system. Actually, in the high security... Evidently not. You think the high security and long-term estate is overpopulated. The data doesn't show that at all. So I suggest you review the data and then reflect on that. The actual situation is that estate is very dangerous because it is incredibly hard to run a prison system in which you allow human rights to these very, very dangerous men. They are given the same basic access to regime as people elsewhere in the prison system, and somehow to stop them committing acts of violence.
OK, gentlemen, I'm going to interrupt and thank you both for two persuasive arguments. Before you both go, David, if you'd be kind enough in a sentence, can you sum up why you think we should be looking at reinstating the death penalty in the United Kingdom?
I think it's very simple. A civilized society recognises that some acts are utterly unforgivable in this world, and therefore a civilized society hangs men who rape and torture babies to death. OK,
thank you for your time. Liam, your final words?
A civilized society does not kill people for convenience or any other circumstance unless it's to defend themselves, and nothing today has persuaded me otherwise.
All right, gentlemen, thank you for your time on this Thursday evening. Thank you for joining us on Talk. I appreciate it. That's Liam Cottrey, Executive Director with Mary Monson Solicitors, also David Shipley, investigative journalist, a former prisoner, and a man who's got a very interesting article about this in the New Spectator magazine that is out today, and you can pick it up on newsstands over the next week. I wanted to get two people on who had very opposing views to this, because I think it's important, because I think it helps with clarity of thought. I think it helps with this debate. I think it helps with this exchange that is happening right now here on Talk. Let's put it to the test. 0344 499 1000. We've got a full switchboard at the moment. We'll answer your calls as soon as we can. This tragic, barbaric case involving this young lad, this baby, who was murdered, a 30-month-old baby boy that was adopted by this man, Jamie Varley, and his partner. And we discovered earlier today the sentencing of Jamie Varley, who's got a whole life order. That means he goes to prison and never comes out, except in exceptional, compassionate circumstances. And it really shook me to the core when I heard the sentencing earlier today, and I read some of the court notes and some of the reports. And as someone who's always been opposed to the death penalty in this country and it ever returning for whatever reason, it shook my belief that we shouldn't have it to the core. And I don't think I'm alone with this. I think heinous crimes like this make all of us, well, they should actually make us reconsider our position on stuff. So Is there an argument here, off the back of this crime, to say that we need the return of capital punishment in the United Kingdom? That's what I want to put to the test with you this evening on Talk. 0344 499 1000. Three things you can do. You can call that number. We'll bank your call. We'll get you on the air. You can send a WhatsApp to that number and I'll read them out. And, of course, you can record a voice note and WhatsApp it to that number and we'll play it out. 0344 499 1000. And we'll get to your messages and calls throughout the evening. And also, we'll look at this in a few moments' time with our debate desk. A couple of stellar debating titans joining me in the Talk studio shortly. Matthew Goodwin Freeman, Conservative councillor and Talk presenter and host of the YouTube show Down the Local. Phil Dave, they're here next at Talk.
We've actually put up with half a century of being told that somehow our national flag is a symbol of oppression. Now, I think if Oxfordshire do this, they'll find themselves completely and utterly defied. People will literally just defy this. And you know what? If people have moved to this country and they don't like our flag, I've got a really simple idea. Go back to where you came from.
Do you ever fear about being arrested because of the socks you wear, Nigel Farage?
Well, I do. You want to see the underpants? Oh, dear, no.
There's the thought. Wow.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is the home of common sense. It's Talk on a Thursday. I'm Duncan and I'm here through until 10 o'clock tonight. It's the evening exchange and I'm in for Peter Cardwell. Let's cross to our debate desk. A couple of titans of Talk, titans of debate. Matthew Goodwin Freeman, Conservative councillor, and also Phil Dave, Talk presenter and also host of the fabulous YouTube channel called Down the Local.
Well, that's very kind of you, Barkes, to say so, and I can't help but think that there's absolutely no reason why you'd say that other than if you actually appeared in about 3 or 4 episodes, but, you know, maybe.
All of us have declarations of interest to make. We've all been on it. We've all...
Exactly.
It's
well,
true,
you know.
actually. Yeah, you've been on it.
True.
Haven't you?
And
Sorry,
you
of
as
course.
well, funnily enough.
I've been on it.
Yeah, quite a few
That's
times.
great.
Well,
yeah.
you know, we don't promote it. Who else will, right?
Oh, it's totally us. It's very simple. It's like if we like discussion, but we also like the occasional pint, please drink responsibly, then, you know, why not? It seems like the perfect combination.
Listen, gents, good to have you in the studio. Our switchboard is absolutely round. We've got loads of messages. Let's start off with this very serious story that for me earlier today just got me thinking, and I spoke to a few people who I know, and I said, look, I'm kind of... This has really rocked me, actually, this case, and you know, I don't want to go into the details of what happened to this 13-month-old baby and how he was murdered, because it is horrific, and people can read about it on newspaper websites and in newspapers, should they choose to. But I do make the point, if you choose to do it, you're going to read some really vile stuff. And
I was going to say, I hope you've got a strong stomach. That's all I can say.
Exactly. And we had the debate earlier with a couple of people on either side of the death penalty issue, and I find myself when you hear cases like this, and not only this, there are other cases that you hear, and you think, well, do you know what? Putting people in prison for life, is that really the best punishment? Has justice really being served? So it gets us back into this age-old conversation about whether or not, off the back of cases like this, we need to have a serious conversation regarding the UK and going forward as a country, whether or not there's an argument to have the death penalty back. And we're no longer in the European Union, right? If we end up with a different government as opposed to this government, from a political party that has agreed or has committed to coming out of the ECHR, then there's no reason whatsoever why we couldn't reinstate the death penalty. But is that something we want in 21st century Britain, Matt?
I think, let's just be very clear. The death penalty wouldn't be used in common everyday cases. We're not talking about, you know, nick a loaf of bread, you're getting the death penalty. We are talking about the worst of cases where a judge, a jury, an entire team decides there is no better choice. Sitting in jail for the rest of your life at a huge cost to the taxpayer. I think it's about £50,000–£60,000 a year it costs the taxpayer.
Per prisoner.
Compared to the death penalty, where we can look at whatever process you want to bring in. We don't have to follow an American model where you sit on death row for however many years and then have the death sentence. We can look at all different sorts of things. But all of the arguments against it tend to be lack of evidence or DNA or getting the wrong person. Those are arguments from the past. They're the arguments from the past. We live in a world now of DNA, technology, and so many times you do get the right person.
Absolutely.
So I'm sorry, we've got to bring it back for the worst of cases.
Right. But also, can I point out that the way that it's actually sort of quite a throwaway comment there, and I know you didn't mean it to be, but it is, to my mind, absolutely despicable the way that we spend more on certain prisoners per annum than we do on nurses.
Yeah.
Can we just get our heads around that? Sorry. Right, the fact that we would sort of, to some nursing staff who would not earn as much as like 50, 60k a year.
Yeah.
We spend that on people who have broken the law, who are the scummest of the scum society.
Yeah. But Phil, is it really down to money in the end? Surely it's about, why is it down to simply cash?
Why? Because I don't want our taxpayers' money to be spent on these reprobates and these wastes of space. I don't want them. Why? Why are we wasting our money? There is so much better things that we could spend money on.
But is there not a better argument by saying that if you had such a harsh deterrent, similar crimes may be deterred in the future? That's certainly a stronger argument than just going, it costs a load of money to keep people in prison.
No, I'm all for that. I'm absolutely for that. But at the same time, I don't want taxpayers' money. We've got homeless veterans who apparently we don't have money for. When we've got pensioners who we have to cut their winter fuel. Like, OK, fine, I get the whole winter fuel thing. We've overcome that, allegedly. But, you know, we cut winter fuel allowance because we don't have money for that. We don't have money for our armed forces. I don't want to spend money on these absolute... I'm sorry, I can't think of any other way to describe them. Scumbags, like these disgusting individuals who are so lucky to breathe the same air we do. I don't want to waste my money on them. I don't care less about them. Why,
Matt, and you're a functioning, well, relatively functioning politician. You're a Conservative councillor. Why do you think...
He means well.
I know. Why do you think no political party has actually looked at this as an issue?
Well, maybe a party should. Maybe a party should put in their manifesto for the next election that we would have an honest conversation about bringing back the death penalty. Because it is one of those things where, as I say, the common argument against it is, well, what if you get the wrong person? What if it's this? What if we can find ways around that. We can find solutions, we can find problems. But we're not talking about the 1960s and 70s anymore. We are talking about 2026.
Yeah.
Technology has moved on, the world has moved on. So, yeah, I say, let's see what party puts it in there.
The miscarriage of justice argument is quite chunky, right? And that always gets rolled out, and rightly so, because you can look at the past, you can talk about the Guildford 4 and the Birmingham 6. You counter that by going, but we have DNA, we have science now in a way we didn't have back then. So you should be able to go, you should be 101% sure that someone is guilty. What about the issue, though, that actually it gives the state the power to legally kill people?
Well, the state's already got the power to legally kill.
But its own people. And what I mean by that is, I mean, I'm always suspicious, no disrespect, Matt, of any politician or any government and giving them too much power, because ultimately, if their back's against the wall, they might abuse it, right? So once we go, let's bring back the death penalty, surely you're giving a bit of a green light to politicians to go, do you know what?
I've not finished
my point. You're giving a green light to politicians to say, yeah, you can kill in my name.
Yeah, but the counter-argument to that is the government's looking at bringing in assisted dying anyway. The government's looking at bringing in assisted suicide. I know it's completely the other end of the spectrum. The government's looking at bringing in the power.
Are you comparing assisted dying with capital punishment?
I'm saying if the government's already going to bring in powers to take away your life, then your argument that they can't do it for capital punishment falls apart.
OK, let's take a call.
And that's what the government is doing right now.
All right, let's take a call. This is Daniel in Purley. Hello, Dan. Welcome to Talk.
Hi, Duncan. Thanks for taking my call.
What would you like to say? We're all listening. Matt's here, Phil's here, I'm here. The floor is yours.
Right, OK. So in my 20s, 30s, I didn't think too much about this. I was perhaps like a lot of people, just thinking that, oh, you know, terrible people, let's get rid of them. And that was it. But about 10, 15 years ago, I watched a program about a guy who used to administer lethal injections in the US. And by the end of that program, I made the decision that we should never have the death penalty. And that was about, say, 10, 15 years ago. Haven't changed my stance since. Okay. And this guy, you could see the faith in and the emotion. One day, he just decided he couldn't do this anymore.
Right.
And so
this was the man, sorry to interrupt, Dan, just so our listeners and viewers are clear, this was the man who administered lethal injections.
Yes. So
and he couldn't do it anymore. So he was the modern-day version of, who was it? Albert Hood was the last hangman, I think, in Britain. So like the modern-day, he was the guy who pulled the lever and the trap door opened. So this was like a modern-day version of that. And what you watching him on the TV convinced you that, given what he had to go through, that there was you couldn't support the death penalty anymore.
That's right. And I think one of the reasons was the reason I have now, which is none of us should have the right to take another life or even maim people, chop people's hands off like they do in some countries, because we do not have the right to do that. No one should have the right to do that to anyone else, whether it's the state or individuals. Right. So we can end up making ourselves as bad as those people. What makes us better than them? Because if you think about the law, we have extreme cases, but there are many cases where someone's right if someone else is wrong. And also you've got the problem of mistakes that we've talked about. Yeah. And you've mentioned some of the arguments about people saying, oh, for very serious crimes, we should do it. But, if we have any doubt about anyone that's being accused of something, then surely they shouldn't be in prison, And
Daniel, sorry, I'm really sorry to know. I 100% agree with that, because I've never ever bought into. Sorry to interrupt you, but I couldn't agree more. I've never bought into this argument about if there's any doubt, well then why have we put someone in prison? Because that's just going to ruin their life as much as taking their life from them. But where I fundamentally disagree with you, and this is where I think that there is no comparison, is you were talking about that chap who used to administer the lethal injections and say that after seeing what it did to him, that no one has the right to do this. Unfortunately, there are some people in this revolting world of ours that do think they have got the right to extinguish life, and they are murderers. And as far as I'm concerned, I think that if you're toying with the idea of keeping the public safe and actually protecting the public purse strings, if I'm brutally honest as well, by extinguishing the life of a murderer versus someone who actually says that just for a bit of fun or as vengeance, they go and kill someone and extinguish their life, I think that's two totally different things.
All right, very quickly, Daniel, come back to Phil on what he's just said, please.
Yeah, I understand, and I think any decent people feel the same about these disgusting murderers, rapists, whatever it is. I feel absolute disgust about these people, but at the same time, I just don't feel we have the right. Apart from putting your trust in the government, I mean, honestly, I don't trust them to collect my bins.
All right, Daniel, great call. Thank you for making it. Daniel in Purley. More calls to get to, more of your thoughts on WhatsApp and voice notes. 0344 499 1000. It's a Thursday evening. I'm Duncan Barkes, and this is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, it is the Evening Exchange. I'm Duncan in for Peter through until 10. We're going to talk about shoplifting, particularly the shoplifting situation where you are, but I must just do some of these messages, and we will do more calls throughout the show regarding this, I suppose in some ways, age-old debate about the death penalty, but I do think we need to have the conversation tonight. This one here is from Chris, who says, when they cancelled the death penalty, they said life would mean life in prison with no release, so they broke that promise. Though in this particular case, he has got this vile man a whole life sentence, and the judge said you will never come out of prison. But I take your point, Chris. Thank you. Ian says, a bit of trivia. In 1992, the death sentence was handed down to a convict on the Isle of Man. It was later commuted to life by the then Home Secretary Kenneth Clarke. The island is a Crown dependency, not part of the UK. I never knew that, Ian. Thank you for sharing that. That's interesting. It's relevant as well. Ernie says, Duncan, if those monsters were sent straight to hell by us having the death penalty, people would feel cheated. That would be too easy for them. I want to see them in a living hell, forever looking behind them, not knowing when something so horrible, just like what they did to that poor boy, is coming their way. That's a living nightmare they have to live with every day, and I hope they live like that for a very long time. Before we get on to the shoplifting... Hang on a second. Before we get on to the shoplifting conversation, let's pick up on what Ernie says, because he's making the point that actually a death sentence is too easy. There's more punishment to be had by them going to prison, where we know that child molesters, child abusers, child killers... to be blunt and quite brutal about it, get targeted by other convicts and in some cases get killed. Is Ernie not onto something?
No.
It's a different form of justice?
No.
Well, why not?
Well, I'll tell you why not. Is because, I'm sorry, why is it? I don't understand how backwards we are as a people. Why do we think of the perpetrator rather than the victim? All that's gone through my mind since hearing about this horrific thing, and I'm going to try not to get too choked up because it really saddens me, but all I've heard about since I've heard about this horrific death of this infant is, what would he have done if he was allowed to grow up? What would he have gone on to? Would he have gone on to be a doctor? Could he have saved hundreds of lives, maybe? Could he have gone on to make the most amazing contribution to society? No, we don't think about that because we're too hell-bent and worried about whether or not the perpetrator has been killed accidentally. What is wrong with people? This individual has snuffed out a life that could be amazing.
Why shouldn't he be made to suffer in prison, not knowing what's happening next? Bearing in mind that the victims...
Because I don't care. I want him gone. I don't want him around.
There's no guarantee.
The victims... family will be suffering for the rest of their lives as well because of the loss of this little boy.
Exactly. And I don't care about him. I care about the victim's family. I care about the victim. And as far as I'm concerned, people sort of say it's a cop-out to snuff out their life. It's not a cop-out. Their life has been terminated, quite rightly, because they're not worth it.
All right, Matthew, quickly.
Well, I was just going to say there's no guarantee that actually their time in prison is going to be horrible and a deterrent. Prison is not a deterrent for many people. It's actually what a lot of people do in winter. They commit crimes that if they're homeless so that they can go into jail for a couple of months. So I'm really sorry, but prison is no longer a deterrent. If you were terrified of going to prison, then I'd understand it. But actually, we've seen it. There's drugs, there's wonderful, lovely beds, there's parties, there's all sorts of crime going on within prisons that are taking place. It is not a deterrent.
And if people were terrified by going to prison, there wouldn't be anywhere near as much crime as there was.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Listen, keep your messages and calls coming in on this 0344 499 1000 to be part of what's going on here at the home of common sense. This is Talk on a Thursday evening. Let's turn our attention to Scotland Yard, who are demanding quicker sentencing and tougher penalties for repeated shoplifting. They say it's quite interesting, this, because it turns out there's just 100 criminals that were responsible for more than 4,000 shop thefts in the past 2 years. So they're suggesting there's this hardcore of shoplifters who are responsible for a big old chunk of shoplifting in London. And whenever I see these stories, what I want to do is, because, you know, we could get analysts on here, boring. We could get, you know, some behavioural experts on here, yawn, and they can tell us why people shoplift. I want to get the reality of life on the street. And I always, whenever I see these stories, want to ask people who watch Talk and listen to Talk to just let us know what shoplifting is like in your neighbourhood, all right? Let's get the reality check of life in 21st century Britain. 0344 499 1000. First off, Phil, shoplifting in your neighbourhood, is it rampant? Is it rife? Or is everything sweet and everyone's behaving themselves like it's 1950s Britain?
Well, first of all, I'd say I don't know off the top of my head what the statistics are for Hertfordshire shoplifting, but at the same time, what I would suggest is that I find stories like this infuriating because let's look at what is actually going on here. I always try and look at bigger picture. I think you both have known me for a while. Barkes, you've probably known me a little bit longer.
Yeah.
And you know that I always try and look at bigger picture. So to my mind, what I'm looking at here is when they say that it emerged 100 criminals were responsible for more than 4,000 shop thefts in the past 2 years, what that is actually doing is a really clever way of twisting what the statistics are to play down the fact that the police are not bothering with shoplifting. So what they're actually saying to people is even if there were thousands and thousands of shoplifting incidents last year, when you say, well, actually, only 100 of those were responsible for about 4,000. So in which case you sort of say, OK, fair enough. So divide up as 40 shoplifting cases. Oh, fair enough. And in that case, suddenly it's not too bad. No, it's absolutely rampant. It's completely and utterly out of control. And this is a blatant attempt at the police to try and play down the fact that they are doing, let's go with NAFL, to combat shoplifting.
Have you ever witnessed it?
I have witnessed shoplifting twice.
What did you see?
I saw someone there was one person who just very confidently sort of picked I think it was a bar of chocolate or something like that and just shoved it in the pocket. And then the most classic example, it's not about shoplifting, but it's still theft, whether you look at it, is the number of times I've witnessed people fare dodging and just pushing through the barriers. That is theft.
Every day.
Yeah, and that's not going to change because, frankly, particularly in London, TfL have just given up, right?
Oh, yeah.
Matthew,
I forgot one. Sorry, there was actually someone, who actually sort of ran out of the shop.
Oh,
sorry,
blimey.
3. Yeah. Well, no, but I mean... Fair dodging is every day. But there was one chap who actually sort of ran out and I saw security guards chase after him, so there was another time.
Matt, I mean, you're a Conservative councillor. Which ward do you represent?
In Hatch End in Harrow.
All right, is shoplifting an issue?
Well, I've seen a couple of issues. The problem is, as well, shops not then following through. So a lot of the time, shops won't report it. They won't bother engaging with the police. We in Hatch End and in Harrow have had incidents happen. I'll also say to people, we see this every day on our phones. There is a video every day of a shoplift going on that nothing happens, and half the time it's the people in the stores who try to do something, and then what we've seen they get fired.
Yeah, I mean, which is extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, there's a couple of things there to unpick, because I've certainly spoken to, not shopkeepers, but people who work in shops, and they say, well, we just don't bother telling the police now because they don't come out, they haven't got the resources.
Well, no, the counter to that would be, and I can only speak for what I know as in my ward, the police do so many operations behind the scenes that people do not know about, and they will not tell the public about until afterwards. But they can only do these based off of the data. They can only do this if they can say, there is a hotspot here, we can see it. So if people don't report crimes, then these numbers are actually low. And it could be worse.
And that is the really solid counter-argument, because the police have to have the data in order to do something greater than just turn up to that instance. So if you run a shop or you work in the shop and someone comes in and nicks something, even if you think it's hopeless, let the police know. It's really important. In my local co-op, they have packets of sausages in a Perspex box, locked.
I've seen cheese in
butter with tags
I haven't finished. With a GPS tracker attached.
We don't even put that on
Just think about that for a second.
Sausages with GPS.
Just mentally walk this through. So it's in a fridge cabinet. You open it up, right? You want your packet of Cumberland. It's inside. Cumberland is a type of sausage.
Oh, fine.
Sorry, not a brand.
Sorry,
Let's be factually correct. We have an onus as responsible
broadcasters.
Apologies. Can we establish that the host of Prick with a Fork, which is the only dedicated sausage podcast that I will listen to, that he would know this.
So, and it's got a GPS tracker in, and I said to the person, I said, so if someone nicks these Cumberlands, right? You're not going to do anything because you've been told by the bosses here not to do anything. Someone's walking down the street with a packet of sausages, and presumably the GPS tracker is activated. I mean, what's going to happen? It's like police cars driving on. He's going left at the lights. Has he got the Cumberlands? I think he has got the Cumberlands. He's going right at the top of the hill. It's just nuts.
No, but I tell you what, though, it's an amazing pastime to look at Waze and watch a little sausage flying down the road. Anyway.
Very true. Very true. Listen, get in contact with us this evening, because I always want to do these stories and just take the country's temperature. How bad is shoplifting where you are in the United Kingdom? If you've seen something, let me know. I just want to find out how bad it is. I don't want to overinflate this, but I've certainly seen stuff. These guys have seen stuff. How bad is it in your neighbourhood? 0344 499 1000 for your calls, your WhatsApp messages, and also your voice notes. In a few moments' time, we're going to talk about AI, artificial intelligence, and how worried and how concerned we should all be about it. A group of tech bods have been meeting at the G7 saying the world leaders really don't understand the potential of this and what it means for employment and society as a whole. We'll get into that next at Talk.
We've actually put up with half a century of being told that somehow our national flag is a symbol of oppression. Now, I think if Oxfordshire do this, they'll find themselves completely and utterly defied. People will literally justify this. And you know what? If people have moved to this country and they don't like our flag, I've got a really simple idea. Go back to where you came from.
Do you ever fear about being arrested because of the socks you wear, Nigel Farage?
Well, I do. You want to see the underpants? Oh, dear, no.
There's the thought. Wow.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It's the evening exchange for a Thursday. I'm Duncan Barkes. I'm here through until 10 o'clock tonight. We're smack bang centre. Well, that's a lie, actually, more than centre. 30 minutes through our debate desk. We have Matthew Goodwin-Freeman, Conservative councillor, Talk presenter Phil Dave in the studio as we chew over some of today's issues. We were talking about shoplifting earlier, and I'm asking people to let me know and us know how bad it is in their neighbourhood. Darren's in Oxford. He's on Talk. Hello, Darren. Are you there, Daz?
Darren. Hello, mate. Sorry, signal's not that great, sorry.
Yeah, listen, the world is listening. What have you got to say?
Yeah, just listened a few minutes ago. I think it was the Conservative councillor, I can't remember his name.
Matthew.
But he was criticising the police for their lack of action. Now, I worked for the police for several years. I was a frontline police officer in an inner city. And I think it's very easy for a councillor to kind of death.
Yeah, I think you misheard.
Yeah.
I'm not criticising the police. I'm defending the police. The police can only act based on the data that they've got. You know, I've sat around our Safer Neighbourhood panel. What I'm saying is shopkeepers, people who see crimes take place, you've got to report it to give the police that ability to say, look, we've got a spike in this area of shoplifting. Can we do a special operation? So I think you might have misheard. I'm not criticising the police. I'm backing them.
He definitely criticised them.
I'm going to have to let you go, Darren, because the signal's awful, mate. But thank you for listening. Thank you for engaging. 0344 499 1000. You want to pick up on the shoplifting conversation. You weren't dissing the police. I was the one who said that I talk to people in shops and they say, well, we don't call the police because they don't come out. But also, you and I both made the point that without the data, the police don't know where the hotspots are. So I think we're home and dry on that.
And I can be very clear. In our area, where we have our SNT, they have conducted operations behind the scenes based on the fact that data's been reported to them and brought down shoplifting. So again, my plea is, if you see something happen, please report it, because it gives the power the police to be able to do stuff.
And furthermore, I don't blame the police in the slightest. I tell you why I don't blame the police is because they do all the work. They're then told there's a ton of paperwork associated with what they have to do to actually get someone over the line. Then they go to court and then they realise they've got some sort of Mr. Whippy judge who's like softer than ice cream, who doesn't give them any punishment. So sorry, I don't blame them at all.
And then also, the people who intervene, the people who stop shoplifters, they're the ones who are getting punished now. We've seen store workers getting fired. Yeah, we've seen store workers get fired for stepping in. And then remember, don't worry, those shops have security guards at the door who don't do anything whenever anything happens. Well, why don't you save the money on a security guard and actually either get someone who is going to stop the criminal or get rid of the security guard?
Seriously, what world do we live in where an individual who tries to stop a shoplifter is at risk of being charged with GBH, and then the shoplifter gets off scot-free?
The whole thing is absurd. And going back to your point, Matthew, I take the view that if you've got a shop that is sacking staff because they've tried to intervene with someone nicking stuff, we should just take our customer away, right? It's utterly ridiculous, utterly ridiculous to treat your staff that way. I want to talk about artificial intelligence because, not because I understand it really, but because I'm interested in the impact in society. So we've got the bosses of the world's leading AI companies. They've been talking to leaders of the G7, as you know, have been meeting inside the last 24 hours. And basically, their message is, look, you guys really do not understand. You world leaders really do not comprehend what's coming down the tracks, how significant artificial intelligence is, and what it means for your populations and your countries. And I think they're probably right. Should we be concerned, Phil, Dave?
Well, Duncan Barkes, the truth is...
Well, that's your name, isn't it?
It is my name. It's your name as well. Look, the truth is, yes, we should be worried. But the truth is we should be worried. And I'm sort of speaking for those who know, I often, more often than not, when I'm on air, I talk about things technology. So I do have a good understanding because I really do study this subject a lot. And I've always said that I treat AI a bit like I treat a knife. And that is that it's not something that should fall into the hands of everyone. Right? It's a tool that could be used for either some really good stuff or really dangerous stuff. And by that I mean, if you were to say, for example, look at a knife, and I don't mean to trivialise it, it's kind of the comparison I think of. If you were to give a knife to some sort of hooligan in the street, they could do a lot of damage with that. But if you give a knife to a world-class chef, they could make something incredible with it. The truth is, you have to realise that AI is not for everyone to control.
But it's out there. There's open AI. I mean, people have access to it.
But no, I agree. But
that's interesting. So do you think there should be some kind of licensing?
Yes, that's exactly what I think it should be. I 100% think that AI should be licensed.
How do you determine whether or not someone can be trusted with AI or not?
Well, how do you know whether or not a surgeon should be trusted with a knife?
Because they've had training.
Exactly. They have to study. They have to know what they're
only experts are allowed to use it?
Absolutely. That's what I'd say.
So you wouldn't be allowed to use it in the workplace, in the office, to write a script?
No, I'm an expert, but yes, I would say... No, but seriously, I'm actually frequency to one side. I'm being deadly serious, right?
Matthew?
I think you need... Look, there's got to be controls. My other job is I work in Parliament, and we have had briefings from organisations saying this is terrifying because there are countries in the world looking at getting AI to run their weaponry, their warheads, their nuclear powers. We're looking at countries that are looking to run infrastructure, entire grids. So imagine if every bit of energy used in this country is controlled by an AI software, which another country then can hack, right? The whole country gone. And we saw how long these cyber hacks take to repair. I do think AI's got to be available for people to use for day-to-day purposes, but that's where there's got to be some control.
But cars are available day-to-day. Let people take a test and let people know what they're getting into. I'm not saying people have got to understand what they've got their hands on here. It's dangerous. It can be if it's in the wrong hands.
Well, that's why we need awareness.
It can also be amazing.
Well, that's why we need awareness, and I think what the AI leaders are trying to say to the governments is this is more than just your ChatGPT and OpenAI. This is talking about global revolutionised AI that could run countries.
But hang on, because the other point I wanted to get to is not just about how it can run countries, it's the impact on society, right? We know that AI is capable of doing thousands of jobs that are currently being done by human beings. Now, if you're a government, that is a massive problem. Do you think any of these world leaders truly comprehend the potential impact that in 5-10 years' time you're going to have vast unemployment because technology is doing the job?
They'll know the numbers. They won't care because their job will be fine, but they'll know the numbers. But that's where we need to be looking at people who then either program or build or maintain or work on the AI softwares. There's a whole new world of jobs that are going to be developed. Some of these things won't even exist right now whilst we're talking.
Can I give you a really quick example then? So I used the knife example, the knife comparison, but maybe that was a bit too trivial. Let me give you a slightly stronger example that I genuinely do worry about. Is supposing people use AI to look at symptoms, medical symptoms, right?
People do.
They absolutely do. But they look at AI for medical symptoms and they diagnose themselves. Now, what on earth can anyone who has got access to AI discover in 7 seconds that doctors who study for 7 years know better than? It's not going to happen, and they could lose their life over it.
Very good point. I want to crowbar in before you two disappear off to the pub or whatever you're doing. This interesting story, exactly that. This interesting story that in the past there were age gaps in relationships, but recent data has shown that age gaps in relationships don't exist in the way that they used to. I mean, there's a slight kind of suggestion that people still get together and they marry and stuff a few years apart from each other in age, but you know, compared to 10, 15 years ago when the figure was bigger if people were like 15, 20 years apart. So I find this interesting. From an age gap point of view, Matthew, and you were good enough to tell me you're married and you're roughly the same age, in the future...
2 months.
All right.
Between us.
Could you ever...
Not us,
could you ever see yourself in a relationship with someone who's 10 years older or younger than you?
10 years older or younger?
Yeah. What's the problem with an age gap?
No. Just I think there's a lot about it's about you're being at the same stage of life, you're going through the same challenges, you're going through the same problems and issues, you're working on these together. The other concerning thing about this is actually the rate of marriage has halved in the last 50 years. That terrifies me because what it should be is those traditional values of you meet someone, you spend a long time together, you know that you're going to stay together, you maybe get a house together, then you get married, then you have the kids. That sort of solid foundation. But instead nowadays it's almost the opposite. You meet up, you get together, and then it's all let's be together. We've got a kid. Oh yeah, now we should think about marriage.
What
the hell about a house? How on earth are we going to afford that?
It has changed. Phil, very quickly, would you date someone 10 years older or younger than you?
I just think love is love. If you're doing it for love, then that's a very good reason. But let me put it to you like this. I think that we can all recognise that if it smells like a fish, it probably is a fish. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't care very much for the fact...
We're not past the watershed yet.
No, but if I'll put it to you like this, okay? If you've got an individual, right, who is about 20, 30 years older, who's an absolute millionaire, dating someone who's incredibly good-looking, then I think we all know what the motivations are.
Gentlemen,
just saying.
Thank you for your time. Matthew Goodwin Freeman. We're done. Conservative councillor, Phil Dave, talk presenter. Thank you. That's been the debate desk. After the news at 8 o'clock, more chat about shoplifting in your neighbourhood. 0344 499 1000.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Duncan Barkes. It's Talk, the home of common sense. Good to have you along on this Thursday evening. I'm in for Peter Cardwell through until 10 tonight, and then I'm back here 7 o'clock Friday in for Peter. The big man returns Monday evening, 7 o'clock here on Talk. Now, I'm probably one of the most honest broadcasters you'll ever meet, hear or see. So I'm going to be really honest with you, okay? It's a little bit warm in the studio because the air conditioning is broken. So if you're watching on YouTube earlier, you might have dialed 999 because you might have felt this fat man was having a coronary, and I wasn't. At least I don't think I have, but it was really, really hot in here. So if you see me glistening a little bit on YouTube, it's all right. Don't panic. I'm being looked after. But the aircon ain't working. And I'm not looking forward to tomorrow because it's going to be a really, really hot day, isn't it? Can we get someone in who can just, like, fan? What do you call it? You know, there must be a hire company somewhere. A couple of people with some big fans who can just be on either side of the camera and just gently fan away. Maybe bring some iced tea. That kind of thing. Anyway, listen, I'm being honest with you. Good to have you along. If you are watching on YouTube, thank you. If you're listening on your smart speaker, on DAB Plus digital radio, this is the home of common sense. And if you just put us on, there's a load of stuff we're talking about. One of the things that we've been chewing over inside the last 60 minutes is this awful case regarding the death of this little lad, this 13-month-old baby boy, Preston Davey. He was adopted by a couple of men. And one of his adopted father's parents, a teacher, has been told he will go to prison for the rest of his life today. This is Jamie Varley, who's 37. He subjected this child to physical, sexual and emotional abuse during the final 4 months of his life. Now, I've taken an editorial decision here. I'm not going to read out what was done to this poor child. But I was reading about it today. I was talking to some friends of mine today because it shook me. And if you weren't listening earlier or watching earlier, I made the point I've always been opposed to the death penalty from the basis that I don't think any government or the state should be able to kill its own people. I'm not talking about a war somewhere. I'm talking about using death as a form of justice. And that's a view I've always held. But every now and then, and including today, something happens where it really shakes my belief that we shouldn't have the death penalty back in this country to the core. And this case has done exactly that. So I want to talk about it tonight. I believe you might have similar feelings to me. So is there any argument to say when we hear about cases like this, awful, vile, heinous, horrendous cases, is there any argument to say that we should bring back the death penalty in this country as the ultimate deterrent? That's what I'm chewing over. Many calls to get to. We will get to them, I promise, and many messages to read out. 0344 499 1000. And if you have just joined us, there was a very interesting debate in the first part of the show, just after 7 o'clock, with two people massively opposed. We had a solicitor on one side of the argument, also a guy who's a former prisoner who believes the death penalty should be brought back to this country. And it was an interesting debate. It's the kind of stuff you get here at Talk that you will not get anywhere else. So do check it out on YouTube. But I'm keen to chew it over with you. I want to take the country's temperature about this tonight because this case is bloody awful. And I don't want cases like this to ever see the light of day again. So I find myself thinking if we had a deterrent, the ultimate deterrent, which is death, commit a certain amount of crime, or certain crimes rather, you will lose your life. Would it stop these crimes being committed? Your thoughts on that? You can call, you can send a voice note, and you can WhatsApp 0344 499 1000. And the other thing that we've been chewing over that's got some really interesting reaction is shoplifting, and shoplifting in your part of the United Kingdom. We have a story knocking around today that Scotland Yard in London are saying, look, we've got some figures here. It's just 100 shoplifters to blame for thousands of thefts in the capital city. Now, you know, we're a national radio station, we're a national platform, so it's not just about London here. And whenever I read about these things, I really want to get into the idea about how bad shoplifting is in your street, in your neighbourhood, in your town or in your city? Because I just want to find out what the reality is. Now, some figures have come out to say that shoplifting has dropped recently. That's not my experience from what I see where I live, and I don't live in London, I live on the south coast. I see stuff being locked up. I see wine in racks behind perspex locked doors. I see sausages, I mentioned earlier, and steak that are in perspex boxes. I see stuff that is tagged. And it's very clear to me that shoplifting is still a massive problem right across the United Kingdom. Now, that's just my experience, and the beauty of us here at Talk is you get to come on the air and tell us what you've seen, what you've heard, what you've experienced, and whether or not there is some kind of deterrent regarding shoplifting. 0344 499 1000 is the number. And I'm just going to chuck this out because in our debate desk earlier, the councillor that we had in, Matthew Goodwin Freeman, rightly made the point that it is absurd that we've had a couple of cases inside the last few months where shop workers, staff, employees have lost their jobs because they actually tackled someone shoplifting, which I just think is bizarre. And I find, I mean, I'll get one of our vast team of researchers to look it up. I can't remember which supermarkets who were responsible. But if they're sacking staff for doing what I believe is the right thing, from stopping someone nicking stuff, why on earth should we reward them with their custom? Seems absurd. So you want to get in on the shoplifting conversation, 0344 499 1000. Let's get a further view on this. Mike Neville is a retired Scotland Yard detective. He joins us on Talk. Hello, Mike. Good evening.
Yes, good evening, Duncan. And I have to say, I would hang the baby killer personally. So I know I'm here to talk about shoplifting, but I offer my services as the hangman.
OK, well, that's interesting. So let's explore that. You've been good enough to offer an opinion on something else we're talking about. You would hang this baby killer person. You'd pull the lever, would you?
I would. I'd have no qualms about doing that. I'm sure it would send a message. The massive increase in the murder rate since 1965, when this was suspended, I really do think it would make a difference. And I think we've got to send out a clear message when these crimes are absolutely wicked and we know the actual proof of it, who's done it.
OK. If you don't mind, can I explore this with you a bit more? Because you've been kind enough to offer this opinion on this issue, and also you have experience that most of us don't have. You're a retired copper. You have some insight into the criminal world. Do you believe that the death penalty would act as a deterrent?
Yeah, it would. I'm a crime historian as well. And if you look at the Great Train Robbery, for example, the villains on the Great Train Robbery didn't take firearms because they didn't want anybody to shoot anybody, and then they'd all be done for murder. So that just shows how the criminals do have this idea in their head that crime, if you commit murder, you will hang, and there's real serious consequences to it.
Do you think there's any realistic prospect that the death penalty will ever come back to this country? I mean, if I was a betting man, and I am occasionally from time to time, Mike, if we had a referendum in this country about this, I reckon the majority of Brits would back it.
Yeah, I agree with you, but they don't want referenda because it'll end up like the Brexit thing, where the people disagree with the establishment, and the establishment is dead against the death penalty, and they'll do everything in their power to. Even if 99% of the public voted for it, they would still try and block it, just like they did with Brexit.
OK, and the final question on this, before we get into the shoplifting, I mean, the counter-arguments that we've heard this evening are about miscarriages of justice. People talk about the Birmingham 6 and the Guildford 4 as a couple of examples. I mean, you and I are both old enough to remember that. If those people, we had the death penalty still when those men were convicted, they'd be dead now, and it turned out they were innocent. Is not the argument of miscarriage of justice the ultimate argument against the death penalty?
There's been more people who've been killed by killers who've been released than people who've been hanged incorrectly. And so I think the ultimate swindle that politicians practiced on us was they told us it was life meant life. And we see this today with the baby killer, but most murderers do not go in for that sort of time. Okay. And I'm sorry, my camera keeps freezing.
No, it's all right. We can hear you. As long as we can hear you for now, that's fine. And you're looking marvellous. Listen, Mike, thank you for that. Let's talk about this shoplifting story. I find it very interesting. Despite the fact that in some areas of the UK it is going down, we hear this evening that Scotland Yard believe that there's a hardcore shoplifters in London to blame for thousands of stuff or thousands of thefts in the capital. They want quicker sentencing and tougher penalties for repeat offenders. I kind of just get the feeling, and this is a gut feeling, that there's almost an element of people just seeing shoplifting now as part and parcel of normal life. It's not really treated as a serious crime. Is that a fair comment?
It absolutely is a fair comment. And when they say the crime has gone down, what that means is reported crime has gone down. So how many shops just think, oh, well, I'm not going to bother? Normally, the only shopliftings that get reported is when a criminal is arrested, or it's something so high value that they've got to report it and claim it on their insurance. So you can't trust the reported crime figures. That's the first thing. The second thing is there's no deterrent whatsoever for this crime. If you think under Theresa May, so that's the Tories, they brought in this £200 limit, and £200 under £200 was treated like a parking ticket sort of thing. So people are not stupid; they'll steal 199 quid's worth. Then you've got Labour, who firstly they've reduced the sentences to 40% of what you're given, and also they've got rid of 1 year's prison sentences. Now, most people never get more than 1 year for shoplifting. And so people, if you're a thief, you know this, the police are solving 1% of theft. So you know you've got 99 times out of 100 chance of getting away with it. And even if you do get caught, the consequences are so minor, you're out and about on the street straight away and you can crack on.
I mean, is there some kind of distinction based on your experience as a retired copper of the kind of shoplifting? I mean, you know, I've come across cases in the past. I'm not saying it's justified, but there are people saying, well, look, you know, I nicked some baby form, you know, because I couldn't afford to feed my baby. And I think some people in society go, well, do you know what? I'm quite relaxed about that. I'm not saying it's right, by the way, just to emphasise that point. Then you've got the other kind of shoplifting, which from what I've read and what I'm led to believe is almost industrial shoplifting, which is like nicking stuff to order. It gets you into criminal gangs. In your experience, is there a kind of distinction? Is there like two levels of shoplifting, if that makes sense?
Well, there would be three, I suppose.
Go on.
First, I don't believe many people steal to feed their baby. Most of the baby milk that's stolen is, bizarrely, I've heard this from one of the heads of the security of one of the 6 big supermarkets, is sent to Vietnam. It's shipped out.
Right.
So the first type of shoplifting is the very organised shoplifting. Alcohol, which is then sold on to unscrupulous club owners, and it's things that are stolen to order. Then you get these drug addicts who are stealing to feed their habit, who are some of these hyper-prolific criminals who've got more than about 50 convictions each. And then you get the sort of chance people who think, well, you know, everybody else is doing it, and I can swift, you know, especially on those self-checkout things. That's the third type of shoplifting. But what you see is, if you think, no, the posters are, if you ask for an image of a shoplifter, it'd be somebody sort of concealing something in their jacket. No, they blatantly put it in a bag and walk out with it. They know that shop workers aren't going to stop them, you know, and they see those cases that you just mentioned, where people walk away, where the shopkeeper gets in trouble or the security guy gets in trouble because they've actually grabbed hold of them. So it's utter nonsense.
What needs to be done here, Mike? Is there a quick and easy solution? Scotland Yard is saying they just want quicker sentencing and tougher penalties for repeat offenders. Is it really that simple?
Well, we need more prisons, don't we? We need a system where what offenders understand is going to jail. If you look at things like tags, they're a trick played on the public. My research has shown that only about a quarter of breaches of a tag have anything done to them, and that might be as little as don't do it again. You know, there's no consequence. So you can't steal from shops if you're in prison. And so I think when you've got these hyper-prolific criminals, we all understand that people deserve 1 or 2 chances in life. But when you get to your 147th chance, it's time to lock them away. And we could crack a lot of crime by putting about, I don't know, 10,000 people in prison. It'd probably stop most of the crimes occurring in the country.
Yeah, and this comes back to prison places, and you and I both know that successive governments really have taken their eye off the ball. They've simply not built enough prisons over the last 20 to 30 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, and they need the political will to build the prisons. Like if I was in charge tomorrow, I'd be like the Dirty Dozen, I'd get the prisoners to put up the camp, right, you know, with the huts and a barbed wire fence around it and a few blokes with dogs, you know, barking at them to keep them in. And we could have it. But most of the politicians believe that criminals are victims of society, that they stole the baby milk because their child was starving. They're naive and stupid, and we suffer the consequences of their naivety and stupidity.
Yes, I think you're right. I think we spend far too much time, and we have done over the last couple of years, and I blame it from the government in 1997, when Blair came in, of trying to understand the causes of crime and going, well, you know, the only reason you behave like this is because of this. And we spent too much focus on that and not enough time actually saying, well, you know, you need a short, sharp shock because you've broken the law. Listen, Mike, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for your time. That's Mike Neville, retired Scotland Yard detective. 0344 499 1000 if you want to pick up on any of his comments here on Talk tonight, particularly the shoplifting stuff. This one here is from Jim in Exeter. It says, shoplifting makes me mad. Life is really tough with prices rising and inflation at the moment. It takes the mick out of decent, hard-working Brits. These cheeky buggers need to be banged up and security guards need to be trained to beat them up proper, says Jim. I don't think we want to be beating people up, but I certainly think the full force of the law needs to be brought down on shoplifters, because I do think there's an attitude now. I mean, I've seen a number of examples. I was talking earlier about my sausages in Perspex boxes with a GPS tracker in another convenience store, a different part of town, and this is about a year and a half ago on a Sunday afternoon. I literally saw one guy came in. You know, if you ever go to IKEA, you get those really big blue IKEA bags. Do you know the ones I'm talking about? Right? Literally, he came in and he was just holding it in one hand and he was just swiping stuff off the shelves into this bag. And I was shocked. It was like, oh? You know, because when you see it in real life, and it's just bizarre. And I said to the young woman behind the counter, I said, does this happen often? She went, yeah, once a weekend. I said, did you do anything about it? She said, oh, we note it. We're not allowed to tackle him, though. And that's where I said, you inform the police? Well, yeah, but sometimes the police aren't interested. So it's an interesting experience. Keep your experiences coming in. Hayley makes a point here. Seriously, Duncan, they could put trackers on sausages, but there are illegal immigrants that we have no idea where they are. We are a joke on this planet. Well, you are onto something there. I mean, I did a show a couple of weeks ago here on Talk, and we have missing failed asylum seekers that the Home Office told a group of MPs they just don't know where they are. I mean, the MPs gave evidence, or rather, the Home Office gave evidence to a group of MPs. There's a Public Accounts Committee, and they were talking about the asylum system, and they got this statement from the Home Office where they just said, we know where the vast majority of failed asylum seekers are. It's like, how can this be? Right? They're in the system. You know about them. They've exhausted the asylum system, and then you've lost track of them. And Hayley rather brilliantly making the point that, you know, we can put GPS trackers on sausages. You can fill in the rest. There's another one here. Bear with me, I've got so many messages coming in. This is MJ. Now, this is about something we talked about on the debate desk earlier with Matthew and Phil. And we had a caller, Darren. I think Darren was in Oxford. He was an ex-copper, wasn't he? And the line wasn't good. So two things here. I'll read out, for the interest of transparency, what MJ has said. The caller, Darren, who had a poor phone line, was absolutely right. On your debate desk, they did criticise the police at 17 minutes to 8. Blimey, MJ, you are a diligent listener. When Phil Dave tactlessly stated, police are doing naff all to combat shoplifting. What does he know anyway? The caller did not have the time to finish what he was saying. Your debate desk was lying. The show is not as good tonight. Well, I'm sorry you feel that, and I'm happy to read that out. So I'd say two things here. One, we have an onus of responsibility. If someone's got a rubbish phone line, right, and I hear it here, and if I'm struggling to hear it, people at the other end, on DAB Plus radio, on YouTube, it'll just be... It's not good radio, it's not good broadcasting. So that's the only reason that I said, well, look, we're going to let you go, Darren, because your phone line's rubbish. It wasn't about the point he was making. It wasn't about putting an issue or a challenge to our debate there. So it was the only reason why we ended the call. And you are right. Phil did say police are doing naff all to combat shoplifting. He did say that. I think the councillor did make the point, and I made the point as well, that it is important to contact the police so at least they can record the incident. So, MJ, can we be friends now? I mean, I've read it out. I've kind of given you my view. Is that OK? Can we move on? Excellent. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Loads more messages, loads of calls. We'll get to them next here on the Evening Exchange at Talk.
We've actually put up with half a century of being told that somehow our national flag is a symbol of oppression. Now, I think if Oxfordshire do this, they'll find themselves completely and utterly defied. People will literally just defy this. And you know what? If people have moved to this country and they don't like our flag, I've got a really simple idea. Go back to where you came from.
Do you ever fear about being arrested because of the socks you wear, Nigel Farage?
Well, I do. You want to see the underpants? Oh, dear, no.
There's a thought. Wow.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Duncan Barkes. It's Talk, the home of common sense. 0344 499 1000, the number you need for your calls, your voice apps and your voice notes. We're going to get a load of calls on air now. Keep calling. We will get to you between now and 10 as we continue to chew over whether or not there's any argument for the return of capital punishment in this country following this vile, awful, just heinous crime that his teacher carried out against a 30-month-old baby boy he had adopted. It certainly has shaken my resolve that we shouldn't have capital punishment in this country. We're looking at that. And we're also talking about shoplifting and how bad it is in your neighbourhood. Let's crack on, because it's a full switchboard. Fee is in Berkshire. Hello, Fee. Welcome.
Hi, Duncan. Thanks for having me on the show, and a great show it is.
Thank you. What would you like to say, Fee?
About the death penalty.
Yeah.
Initially, when I first called, and I've been listening to the debates that you've had since I first called at the beginning of the show,
Yeah.
I was completely against wanting to have the death penalty. My view was life should mean life, and presumably there may be, let's say, some internal punishments once they go to prison, and maybe there should be something along the lines of solitary confinement, and then they only come out to eat or they get fed. I'm not sure, but now, having listened to some of the debates, I am being swayed a bit by Phil and was it David, Liam and David?
Well, we've had a couple of guys. So on the debate desk, we had Phil and
David,
Matthew.
I think.
Yeah.
I can understand Phil's viewpoint in relation to the cost, but then also, if I think about it, if I was on a jury for a case as absolutely horrific as this, I still don't know if I could make a decision to put someone to death.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense.
It's a really difficult dilemma.
And it's a massive responsibility for a jury, isn't it? Because you're actually, it's going from one thing of saying you're going to spend the rest of your life behind bars to becoming your life is going to be ended. So maybe ultimately cases like that, maybe, and there's a lot of issues with whether or not this is true justice, don't get heard before a jury, and perhaps there's just a judge who decides what the ultimate punishment is.
Yeah. I mean, it is something that might become a worthwhile deterrent to others committing such a crime if they know that potentially it could mean the end of their life. But the other point I wanted to raise was, and I can't speak for working in social services, I have no idea what pressure these people are under with case levels and everything else, but I am sick and tired of the rhetoric of lessons will be learned, we are going to learn lessons, and there has been too much of this going on now.
You are so right,
Something has not changed. Nothing has changed.
No. And without being disrespectful to this baby boy who was murdered in this way, what you're right to bring this point up, because all we hear is, oh, we're going to launch an inquiry. Well, there's loads of bloody inquiries going on, and it seems to me there's no proper outcome to it.
No,
and
exactly.
Sometimes the people who perhaps could have done more to stop things happening always seem to remain in their job. It's ludicrous. Listen, Fee, it's a great call. I'm only going to move it on because I have pledged to get as many calls on the air. Yours was great, as I think Alison in County Antrim will be. Welcome.
Hello, Duncan.
Hi, what would you like to say?
Yeah, well, I've thought long and hard about this pair who have committed this, this terrible act on this little boy. And every time I look at his little face, my heart just swells. But I'm like that anyway. I love children. I always have. I have a lot of time for them. And their innocence takes up a big place in my heart. And I just really believe fervently that these pairs should be put to death. I just don't think that there's any other action that is suitable for it.
And do you believe that would be the ultimate punishment, or do you also think that having that kind of punishment in place may in the future deter similar crimes from happening? Do you think it would be a deterrent?
Yes, I do think it would be, Duncan, because these pair had the nerve to film their depravity on this child on their phone.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I witnessed one of these videos, and it did upset me.
I don't think you're going to, Alison, but please don't relay what you saw, because I think
No, I definitely won't. Don't worry, because I realise we're live. And
and the other thing we've got to consider, not only were these two men in a position of trust as foster parents, one of them was, one of them was a bloody teacher, right? Someone who works with children on a daily basis.
Yeah. It's just, well, apparently, now I don't know how true it is, but I read on social media that...
well, listen, I'm going to stop the conversation there, because I don't know what you're going to say, and social media is not always the most reliable source. So I'm only going to move it on because I want to get more calls on as well. But Alison, a great call, thank you. Hello, Grace in London.
Hi. And first of all, I would say condolences to anyone who knew this precious child, or to anyone who has lost a loved one to other crimes for which one might presume there should be a death penalty, because I know that just the bereavement that some people must be suffering whilst they're hearing about things like this and thinking, my loved one also suffered, and why don't we have the death penalty for those criminals? It must be just, so condolences to anyone who might be experiencing that pain, but I don't think we should have the death penalty. Partly, as has been said, it doesn't seem to work very well as a deterrent. I would have thought, actually, that being stuck behind bars for the rest of your life would be less appealing than just having your life end. Hence, we know some...
But that's the argument, the counter-argument against what you've just said is that we have whole life sentences in this country, which is what's been handed to Jamie Varley, and it clearly wasn't a deterrent in his case. He carried on with these heinous crimes.
Yeah, I guess it's difficult to get into the heads of these completely evil, mad, depraved people. But I also think, and this will sound mad in another way, David Shipley said he's a Christian, and I, as a Christian, think, actually, contrary to what he said, it is possible for people to change. I'm not saying that I think it will happen in the case of these two individuals, but actually my experience is that we can really change our attitudes completely towards...
Yeah, I mean, you might be right. I mean, people make the point that the prison shouldn't necessarily be just about punishment. It should be about rehabilitation. But I do find myself thinking, when you have extreme cases like this, whether or not rehabilitation is ever possible. But I'll let other people answer that question. 0344 499 1000. Grace, thank you. This is Karen in Bournemouth. Hello, Karen.
Hi, Duncan. How are you?
Very well. What would you like to say?
I would like to say I don't want to bring back hanging for those two, because at the end of the day, I want them to feel what they put the baby through. And in jail, I want him to feel like he can't close his eyes, can't go for a shower, can't go to the dining room, because he's too afraid to move out of his cell.
And that would be a form of punishment, living the rest of his life in abject fear, as you could argue, this 13-month-old little boy was doing every time he opened his eyes in this monster's care.
Yep, it's not anything to do with money, because hanging when it was about wasn't a deterrent anyway. So, you know, that would be pointless. It's not about the money of what it costs to keep them in prison. But if they don't feel what they put other people through, then there's no punishment.
Understood. Karen in Bournemouth, thank you for your excellent call. Listen, there's so many calls to get to. We will do our best to get them all on the air between now and 10. 0344 499 1000. I know there's messages to do as well. This is a very emotive subject, and I make no apologies for doing it, because I speak from the heart when I do a lot of these shows. And whilst we're not doing any politics tonight because of this by-election and the polls closing at 10, so we can't do any of that, when I read about this story, I thought I just want to come on the air, actually, and just find out what people think about this, because I keep coming back to this point that if we had the ultimate punishment in this country, which is the loss of life, you get put to death for horrendous crimes, would this 30-month-old baby who was murdered still be alive? And it gets us into all kinds of areas. And a really good point that was made a few moments ago is quite simply this one. And a caller said, well, if you were serving on the jury, it's one thing saying, yeah, I think this person is guilty, knowing that you're going to end their life. It's another thing saying, I think they're guilty and they're going to prison for the rest of their life. That is a big responsibility for an individual and a jury, isn't it? And I'd thought that until I took that call, which is why this radio station and this platform is so important. 0344 499 1000. Keep your calls coming in and your messages. We're going to take a break from this in a second and talk about the future and artificial intelligence. Should you be concerned? I'm terrified. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is the Evening Exchange. It's a Wednesday. No, it's not. It's a Thursday. I'm Duncan Barkes. I'm here through until 10. We have Andre and Ash here from 10 tonight. And, of course, at 10 o'clock, that's when the polls close at this by-election that's going on in Greater Manchester. So for all of you political anoraks, you can have your say after 10. In the meantime, I want to look at this story about AI, artificial intelligence, which in the past is something I found myself thinking, it's not going to affect my life, really. I mean, how's it going to impact on my life? But then when you dig a little bit deeper, the consequences potentially to society, to the country we live in, to employment, are simply vast. And if I've understood it correctly, and I'm not always the sharpest when it comes to tech stuff, this potentially could see tens of thousands of people out of work, right? I know of people, I'm not going to name their names, in the creative industries, I'll give you two examples. Someone who works as a wedding planner, someone who works as a voiceover artist, right? Both roles requiring creativity. And they're looking at giving it up. And they're looking at giving it up because AI can do the job. And you might be thinking, how does that work with wedding planning? Well, you can quite simply tell your AI software how you want your wedding to look. You can get them to suggest suppliers. They can look at all of the pricing for you. It's all available. They go away online. They capture all of this stuff. They'll even write you a script if you want to say nice things about your hubby-to-be. And then the voiceover stuff, and it's already out there, I think I can almost tell when it's AI compared to a real person, but there will come a time when I can't. You know, I've got a mate who's a voiceover artist, and she's just going, well, I'm going to do something else. Because clients that used to book her to say nice things about lawnmowers ain't doing it anymore because they're using AI. So let's dig into this. And let me ask you this, because I think this is a slightly different question. Whatever you do for a living, are you worried that AI might replace you? 0344 499 1000. And you might be thinking, yeah, I'll be all right. Well, we're already talking about robots in healthcare. We're talking about AI and robots in social care, in care homes, doing certain tasks. And when you start thinking along those lines, you think, blimey, well, potentially they could do anything. They could do accounting. Who needs accountants? Let's get the old AI to do it. Let's get an informed view on this, as opposed to this slightly middle-aged man wondering whether or not we're going to hell in a handcart. This is Will Guy, top tech expert, and he joins us. Hello, Will.
Yeah, evening, Duncan. Do you want to know the craziest thing? Radio presenters are now actually being replaced by artificial intelligence. Not on this particular fine network, but some in the UK have already replaced the sports reader with artificial intelligence. And if you've ever heard it trying to announce the surname Raducanu, you know that it's not quite ready for prime time, but it's coming.
It is coming, and I know in the US there are basically AI radio presenters on music stations, right? And there's a couple of radio stations, I think in Florida, who they just have presenters that they're not real. It's AI. I like to think I've probably got at least another 10 years before they can perfectly create some middle-aged fat man on the radio who's got vibrant opinions and hot takes on issues before AI properly takes over.
The really interesting thing here, though, is what the market ends up being, because I can't imagine there being a market for an AI-generated Duncan Barkes talking to an AI-generated Will Guyatt, because neither of us are then here in that transaction. But as has been shown on Spotify and other music platforms, the amount of AI-generated music, it's a bit like, is darts a sport, right? The amount of AI-generated music that's appearing on these platforms is actually now outweighing the amount of human-generated music. And the companies don't seem to care massively, because people are still listening to the artificial intelligence-generated music, not seeing the difference, and they're still able to sell the adverts. So you kind of end up in this kind of place where we keep saying as humans, oh, nobody will replace me. But if the people at the end, the listeners, the audience, the fee payers, don't really see a difference, I know what companies are going to do, because they're going to go for me or you that could do a 4-hour shift and then need a drink and a sleep. Or they could go for an AI-generated version of a human that could do 24/7, 365 days a year. And rather than get tired and old and lose intelligence and knowledge as you get older or whatever, it's always going to get better and better and better as they kind of keep reiterating the technology. So it's coming for everybody, right? And I don't mean that in a paranoid way. The numbers, when people said a couple of years ago, and I was talking to your colleague Ian Collins, and I think the numbers at the time were estimated like 300 million jobs could be lost globally within a decade. And this was probably 7 or 8 years ago. And people were like, no, you're mad. This will never, ever happen. But we're on the verge of it happening. The voiceover artists, the wedding planners, the bookkeepers, all of these jobs are starting to get eroded. The customer
all right, so Will, just to be very clear here, basically what you're saying is we're all done for. So my next question has got to be, how long have we got?
Well, this is the challenge with this, right, Duncan, is We are probably all done for.
Great.
But the bigger issue here is governments just aren't talking about it.
No.
They're obsessed about all sorts of other things. Our government keeps talking about this, and the previous government, importantly, talked about AI being a co-pilot, being something that will be there to help and support us.
Yeah.
This is the same government that is suggesting it's now going to lay off a ton of civil servants to save money because they can do it quicker with artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
So if they're going to start removing staff from the workforce, what's going to stop other businesses doing it too? That's the problem.
Yeah, and what's interesting and what sparked this particular debate is you've got the bosses of some of the world's leading AI companies who are saying to the leaders of the G7, listen, you need to find a way of not only governing AI in the future and how it's used, but also you really need to understand the impact this is going to have on people in your countries. And there's kind of a suggestion here that some of these G7 leaders are either just putting their fingers in their ears and going, no, I can't hear you, or they simply don't understand what's coming.
Yeah, you're far more attuned to what goes on in the world of politics than I am. But what I do know is the EU, we're going to have the world's toughest set of guardrails and protections for people in Europe around artificial intelligence. Those very quickly got eroded when EU ministers thought that Europe was going to get left behind, companies weren't going to invest there, and lobbyists for all of those tech companies got in people's ears. So the biggest challenge, I think, for me at the moment is it seems quite nebulous at the moment because we keep talking about it, we keep talking about the rise of the robots and blah, 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 blah. But the reality is, even basic things like, for example, 5 years ago, if I needed to look through a spreadsheet and pick out a few bits of information, it might take me an hour or so. Yeah. I can now say to an AI tool, take a look at this and give me the most interesting stats. I don't even need to look at it, and it does it in about 5 seconds. So it can speed up every element of a person's life, but it will take jobs as well.
Understood. Do you think there are any roles or jobs that ultimately could not be done by AI? I mean, off the top of my head, I'm thinking, if you need someone to come and sort out your U-bend, right? You need a plumber. I mean, you probably still need a bloke to turn up in his dungarees and his van with some wrenches in the back and some piping, don't you? I mean, AI couldn't replace a plumber, could it?
But some tech investor will suddenly say, this is the last frontier, we're going to develop it. For example, a couple of years ago, we were telling kids at school to be coders, and we were telling them to go and learn computer coding. Entry-level coding jobs have been practically eradicated in 2 or 3 years. So my daughter, who's now 8 and is sort of thinking, what does she want to do? I'm going, maybe become a vet, maybe become a hairdresser, because those are 2 things that require you to A, stick your hand up an animal's backside, or B, be dexterous with your hands for the hair. Yeah. But I'm now hearing that artificial intelligence and robots are being developed which are now dexterous enough to cut hair. We find ourselves in a situation where every solution to every problem will now be fixed, which will essentially engineer us out of having to do anything. And then what are we going to do? Because how are we going to earn money? Are the government just going to pay us to sit at home? Like, there's all sorts of questions here. Or do we end up in some poorhouse oiling and servicing actual robots, or trying to fix artificial intelligence problems? It's like we're rushing into something and it's not being properly dealt with. We're all fixated with the dangers of social media, for example. Yeah. Nobody is properly looking at the regulation of artificial intelligence. So hope it doesn't take 15 years, like it did with social media, to get to a point where we're about to implement a ban. If it takes another 15 years for artificial intelligence, we are all doomed.
I think you're right. Well, it's always a pleasure. Thank you. Top tech expert Will Guyatt, someone I've spoken to over the years on various radio stations about all things tech related, and he's great because he strips it down and talks in a way that, well, you and I can understand. I am keen to pick up on this AI conversation. Are you worried about artificial intelligence at all, particularly when it comes to your job? Do you think AI could do your job? Now, I don't want to upset any London cabbies listening, because I know from previous experience, sometimes they can get a little bit leery. And I don't want to upset anyone who drives for a living, right, in any part of the United Kingdom. So if you're a private hire driver in Leeds or in Aberdeen or whatever, or in Penzance, don't upset you. Don't upset you if you're a trucker and you're starting your shift delivering stuff around the UK. But are you worried about AI? Because I see, and I've only seen it in London, admittedly, I've seen these cars, right? These robotic cars driving around. They use artificial intelligence. At the moment, they have to have a real person behind the wheel They're ugly things as well. I mean, I often get stuck behind them at traffic lights. So if you drive for a living, right, do you think ultimately you're going to lose your job because in a few years' time, AI will replace you? If you're an accountant, have you got concerns? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
We've actually put up with half a century of being told that somehow our national flag is a symbol of oppression. Now, I think if Oxfordshire do this, they'll find themselves completely and utterly defied. People will literally justify this. And you know what? If people have moved to this country and they don't like our flag, I've got a really simple idea. Go back to where you came from.
Do you ever fear about being arrested because of the socks you wear, Nigel Farage?
Well, I do. You want to see the underpants? Oh, dear, no.
There's the thought. Wow.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
I'm Duncan Barkes, this is Talk. If you just put us on, firstly, thank you. You've got tremendous taste. And secondly, let me just tell you about a couple of the things, well, 3 things we're chewing over and we're keen to get your reaction to tonight. We're talking about artificial intelligence and whether or not you're worried about your job and whether or not you could be replaced by AI. We're also looking at shoplifting. I'm keen to find out in your part of the UK, in your neighbourhood, your streets, your town or your city, how bad is shoplifting? Only because Scotland Yard in London say, look, we know there's just 100 shoplifters to blame for thousands of thefts in London. We know who they are. What we need is quicker sentencing and tougher penalties. And wherever I read stories like this, I find myself thinking, OK, well, that's interesting, they're law enforcement officers, but let's find out the reality of the real world that you and I live in. So how bad is shoplifting in your part of the UK? And something that's getting a lot of reaction tonight, and I'll be brutally honest with you, when I was working with the team earlier about some of the things we're going to do tonight, I wasn't entirely sure whether or not we should do this, but what convinced me it was the right thing to talk about is when I spoke to some people in my life, some friends of mine, who shared the same view, or had the same, how can I put it, reservations about their existing view, which is there's no place for the death penalty in this country in the 21st century. Because when you read about the murder of this 13-month-old baby boy who was psychologically, sexually and physically abused by his father, he was adopted by 2 guys, and he was treated appallingly. When you read about this case, and I'm not going to go into the details, and you read about the sentencing, which has happened earlier today, which is a whole life order, which means that Jamie Varley will never be released from prison, I certainly found myself thinking, in cases like this, is there an argument to say, do you know what, maybe we need the death penalty back in this country as a deterrent to stop these vile crimes happening? And I spoke to a couple of friends of mine and they said, you know, it's interesting because I've had the same thoughts. So I'm lucky, I'm privileged. I have a platform here at Talk and I thought I'd put it to you tonight. What do you think? 0344 499 1000 for your calls, your WhatsApps and your voice notes. Stack of those to get through, and I pledge to you we'll do as many calls as we can between now and 10, as well as talking to some guests who can offer various perspectives on this. Let's talk to Sharon Birch, consultant for the Safeguarding Network, who joins us. Sharon, good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Listen, thank you for your time. I'm going to ask you a very broad question here. What's your main takeaway so far regarding this tragic case, and what could have been done potentially to stop it happening?
Well, it is an absolutely barbaric case. It is one of the worst that I've ever heard about, never mind dealt with in my 40 years of working in this field. It is very tragic. Obviously, we need to be doing things better, and the serious case reviews that will take place after this will highlight things that could have been done that we can improve on in practice. The fact is, these guys were ace manipulators and very charming, and were able to convince people that they were the right people to look after this little boy, and it's far, far from the truth. And I do believe that they deliberately set out to adopt him for these purposes, and whether they intended to murder him, I don't know, but I think they did intend to do these horrific things to him, and it's absolutely terrible. It's very, very tragic.
That's quite a bold statement to make. So you believe ultimately the objective was to adopt a young lad so he could be abused?
I think so. You know, they only had him for a matter of 4.5, 5 months, and you don't go from nothing to all of that without some sort of plan. If you are going to abuse a child and it just sort of, it's not a plan, you don't do that such horrific stuff that quickly, I think it was. And I've met people in my previous professions where they have deliberately set out to either have a child or adopt a child to do some of those things too. And we have to look at reality. This is some people in society, a very, very small amount of people, but it is there in some people.
OK. This is your area of interest. You know about safeguarding. It's not an area that I'm particularly well informed about, and I suspect most of our viewers and listeners here at Talk will have gaps in their knowledge. What kind of process would have had to be undertaken by the authorities to decide that these two men were suitable as parents to adopt this little boy?
Well, it's quite a rigorous process, and obviously I don't know this particular adoption companies' processes, but they're all very similar. The DBS checks, the financial checks, family checks, background checks, education, everything. But what we've got to remember is all of these checks only prove that you've not been caught yet. And it's absolutely standard that you have to do the checks, absolutely. Training, and I think they did their safeguarding training and adoption training through COVID, so maybe that might not have been so rigorous as it would have been had it been face-to-face. But, you know, as a society, we want to believe people, and we want to believe professional people. We have this idea of the sort of people that are child abusers, but the reality is there is no set person. And if we're not looking for it and we're not seeing it, and we don't want to see it. And I think the more checks we can do, and if there's something that comes out of this serious case review that can enhance that, brilliant. There are already a lot of checks that take place, and these people, like I said, they can get around that. They can be very charming and very manipulative.
Do you think there's also an element to Jamie Varley, the man who's been put behind bars for the rest of his life? The fact that there's an element of, look, he's a teacher, so therefore we can trust him maybe. Is that relevant to this process, do you think?
It is relevant because these people who want to abuse children, that do abuse children, put themselves where they've got access to children. And you'll find them in all sorts of public sectors, in charities, in things like scouting and sports clubs, to get access to children. And they're the very professions where you would find these people. But by nature, they're the professions where people who have a huge empathy that want to work with children will go. So you've got to be very adept at spotting it. And if you have any worries or concerns about anybody, it's that professional curiosity about asking those questions and thinking the unthinkable that are really difficult and we don't want to do, but we have to.
The baby boy's grandmother said that she believed, and I'm choosing my words a little bit carefully here, but she believed that the fact that these two men were in a relationship together was relevant to perhaps the warning signs being missed, because social workers or those in authority were maybe reluctant to raise concerns because they might be accused of being homophobic. Do you think there's any mileage behind that?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know really, realistically. I can understand why she might think that. I mean, she's a woman who's grieving. It's a terrible set of circumstances. But we've got to look at everybody in society. It doesn't matter what your job is, what your sexuality is, your race, your culture, anything. We've just got to forget about any of that, because anybody and everybody is capable of committing these offences. We've got to be aware that anybody can do that. Not everybody will, obviously, but we've got to be aware that it can go across any sort of part of society. The fact that these are two gay guys that have adopted, and a lot of great gay people that adopt people, it shouldn't be a factor.
And a final question here. I mean, we've been talking about this on the show, and what I find quite interesting about some of the reaction to this is, you mentioned there's going to be a serious case review, or there's going to be some kind of inquiry. Some of our viewers and listeners are going, what's the point? We seem to have inquiries whenever there's cases like this, and nothing ever seems to change. And also, we've had callers just say, and no one ever seems to be held to account. No one loses their job because they didn't do their job properly. Is that an overreaction, or can you understand where that view comes from?
I can understand it, but what we've got to remember is that every time a child dies, and abuse is a factor in that death, or somebody in the family is suspected to have been responsible in any way, or they're in professional services, there is always a case review. There are serious case reviews going on all over the country all of the time. We only hear about the high-profile ones. We always get lessons to be learned. People are held to task. People do lose their jobs. We don't always hear about it. But in every case, in hindsight, we can always look back and think, I wish I'd done something different. Doesn't matter whether it's a child death or anything else. The important thing is, what are we putting into place, and does that happen? We need more follow-up with that. We need to make sure that it does happen. We need to be tightening those nets all of the time to close all of those loopholes. And I think that's where sometimes it falls down. It's not anybody's individual responsibility, but collectively, for all of the professionals involved, we need to make sure that we are closing as many loopholes as we can.
Sharon, thank you. That's Sharon Birch, consultant for the Safeguarding Network. And I wanted to get Sharon on to offer another perspective to something that's dominating much of our show this evening. You want to pick up on anything Sharon said, 0344 499 1000. Back to this idea that if we had the death penalty, such horrendous crimes may not be carried out in this country. A lot of messages coming in. Karen in Taunton, if there was a case for bringing back, if there was ever a case for bringing back the death penalty, we've now got to pay to keep this animal for the rest of his life. If I had my way, he would be slowly tortured before a lethal injection. That poor, beautiful baby, says Karen in Taunton. Glyn in Ketterick says, I wholeheartedly agree about a life sentence not being enough for such a heinous crime, but we have to be 100% plus sure to have a death penalty. Thank you, Glyn. I think that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, the arguments we've heard against it from people, which is, well, we've had over the years various examples of miscarriages of justice. So we have to be more than 100% sure. And people say, well, yeah, we've got the technology and the science is a lot better than it used to be. Doesn't necessarily stop people, human beings, rigging stuff, though, does it? And I just think that's relevant to this debate. And one here, I don't want my hard-earned tax used to try and rehabilitate scum like this. Where there is concrete evidence and the crime is of this level, the perpetrators should be sentenced to death, and this should be carried out quickly, not decades later, like they are in America, says Kerry. Plenty more messages to get to on this, and more of your calls as well. If you want to get in the show, on the list, 0344 499 1000 for your calls. We'll rack them and stack them. You can also WhatsApp that number, and I'll read your WhatsApp out. And you can send a voice note. If you want to voice note me and send it over, we'll play it out. 0344 499 1000. After the news at 9, we look at some of today's big news stories with the political editor of The Independent. His name is David Maddox. He's here next at Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just turned 9 o'clock on this Thursday night. I'm Duncan Barkes. It's the Evening Exchange at Talk. I'm in for Peter Cardwell through until 10. I'm back here tomorrow, Friday evening, from 7 with the Evening Exchange, where there will obviously be a lot of political chat. And the big man, Peter Cardwell, back in his rightful place here Monday evening from 7 o'clock. We're chewing over a load of stuff. I think you know what's going on here. A lot of reaction, understandably and rightly so. And I'm pleased, thank you, regarding whether or not there's any argument for the return of the death penalty following this tragic case of Preston Davey. And I think it's a fair question to ask. And I wanted to take the country's temperature tonight. And I mean, a lot of people getting involved. And I think to say it's probably back of an envelope calculation, about 80 to 85% of people saying, you know, with cases like this, I think maybe there's an argument to return to having capital punishment. And that is exactly the position I'm in. And if you missed it earlier, I've always taken the view that we shouldn't allow the state to have the right to kill people in this way, okay? Because once you say to politicians, right, of any government, I'm not making a political point, do you know what, we endorse you using capital punishment as a tool, it might one day become a weapon. Do you understand what I'm saying? So that's always been my reason. But when I hear about cases like this, my resolve, which is we shouldn't have it in a civilised society, is really shaken to the core, and it has been tonight. And I think it has been with the majority of you as well, because you've been very candid. So I'll continue to get your reaction on that. We're also trying to work out the extent of shoplifting in your part of the United Kingdom. Scotland Yard is saying, look, we know that a massive chunk of shoplifting right across the capital is carried out by a hard core of about 100 shoplifters. And they want a couple of things. They want quicker sentencing and tougher penalties for repeat offenders. What's the reality of what it's like where you are? And some interesting chat coming in about artificial intelligence as well, as AI company leaders are saying to G7 leaders, you know about the G7, these great world leaders, you really don't understand what's coming down the tracks with artificial intelligence and the impact on your country and your societies that you are responsible for. So my question to you is twofold regarding this. How concerned are you about artificial intelligence? But to bring it to you in a very personal way, could your job be done by AI? Could it be done? Are you worried that you might lose your job in 2 years' time, 5 years' time? Because ultimately, artificial intelligence can do it. And you might think you have a nice boss. You might think, oh, my boss likes me, I'll never be replaced. Well, I'm here to tell you the reality of life is if your boss thinks they can find a cheaper way of getting the job done, you will be out the door. And think about it. If you're a big company, no people to deal with. You wouldn't need those HR experts. You wouldn't need personnel. You wouldn't need people dealing with disputes in the workplace because the AI is doing it all. Could you be replaced by AI? 0344 499 1000 for your calls, your voice notes and your WhatsApp messages. We also have a text number. I've not mentioned it so far tonight. 87222. 87222. Start your message with the word talk. Joining me to go through some of today's stories, and particularly the ones I just mentioned, is the political editor of The Independent, David Maddox. Welcome, David.
Hi, Duncan. How are you?
Very well indeed. Always a pleasure to see you, and thank you for joining us tonight. I mean, one of the big stories we've been talking about is the sentencing of Jamie Varley. I'm not going to go through the details of what this, I'm going to use the term monster, what this monster carried out. He's going to do a whole life order behind bars, a whole life sentence rather. We've had a lot of reaction to this tonight. About 80 to 85% of all of our callers and messages are saying in cases like this, I think there's an argument for the death penalty. I'm not necessarily going to ask you whether or not you think there should be, because I'm interested in the political aspect of this. Because do you think a political party would ever have the backbone to say to the people, vote for us, because we'll bring back the death penalty?
Well, I mean, traditionally, it's been a kind of conscience vote issue in Parliament. And there's always been bigger support amongst the public than there has been amongst politicians for the death penalty. And the only thing I would say, and I look at this and I completely sympathise with the argument. You just say, what value is there in keeping this person alive at the expense of the taxpayer, frankly.
Yeah.
And but bad cases make bad laws, and I mean, I just heard what you just said there. I completely agree with you about the giving the state the power to kill people in this respect, because we see in so many ways, that you start off with either hard luck cases or really bad cases, and then the kind of sphere, the tentacles of the state use that and spread out, and then suddenly you're finding these powers being used for all sorts of reasons that you never imagined for. So once you open the door for that, then I agree with you. You never know what's down the line. And
I mean, I find myself thinking that it's quite an easy win for a political party, this, isn't it? Given what I think is the mood of the nation when it comes to governments perhaps being quite weak on justice, that's the view of some people. Given our response tonight here on Talk, if you were a political party who wanted quite an easy win in terms of getting support from voters in this country, you may well stick this in a policy in your next manifesto.
I still think it's a kind of core vote strategy. I don't think there's wide enough support for it. I mean, although maybe Reform or Restore will be picking this up. I mean, it's but I don't see it as a wide enough support for them to really kind of draw us as a political win, and it's the sort of thing that puts people off as well. That's the only issue. Otherwise, I suspect a party would have already done it, frankly.
Yeah, that's a very good point indeed. Listen, let's just move it on to the issue of defence for a couple of reasons. I mean, we're hearing tonight that Russia has pledged to hit back with massive group strikes in response to Ukraine's largest ever drone bombardment of Moscow. We're hearing inside the last few minutes that Ukrainian forces launched nearly 200 drones at the Russian capital inside the last few hours in a third consecutive day of attacks. That's more than 1,000 drones that were fired at Russia on today alone. We also know that the UK is to provide 150,000 Ukrainian-produced drones and over 350 air defence missiles and radars funded by this thing called the Extraordinary Revenue Acceleration Loan. And just to give people a bit more context, the UK will provide these drones, 150,000 of them, to Ukraine by the end of the year as part of a £752 million funding package to help Ukraine defend their freedom and sovereignty. Now, putting to one side whether or not there are vast amounts of people in this country who want to continue to support Ukraine's war against Russia, and for the record, I think that's what we should do as a country. This is an interesting thing, isn't it? Because we know that over the last several days there have been issues with defence spending. We know that there have been government resignations, yet some viewers and listeners to Talk might find themselves thinking, it's extraordinary this. Apparently we can't fund our own defences, yet we can bung a load of cash towards Ukraine.
Well, the one thing I'd say to your viewers and listeners is that funding Ukrainian defence spending is, in a way, funding our own defence spending. Ukraine has become a test bed of drone warfare. Let's be honest about it. The fact that they have, I mean, I kept on hearing from experts that Ukraine is going to fall over any time that it's running out of resources and people, and now they're attacking Moscow. So, and let's be blunt. I mean, Russia is the enemy. Ukraine is the country that's fighting it, but there's a reason we're bunging weapons and resources there, is because, just the other day we had a Russian battleship firing out in the Channel. I mean, we're under constant threat, constant surveillance. We've had assassinations in this country. We are, we're not at war, but we're not at peace with them either. They are, and we're being told that NATO countries can expect in the next 5 years to actually be fighting Russia. So money to Ukraine is not lost money. I mean, there is a different issue about our own defence spending, and quite frankly, we're at the cusp of this government changing potentially. I won't go into it because I realise we've still got some time to go before polls close.
Yeah, 49 minutes left. Yeah.
Yeah, but so I won't go into that. But if we end up with a different leader,
Yeah.
the question for Labour will be, can they be trusted with our defence at the most crucial time, really, since the end of the Cold War? And this could be the make or break issue for them. John Healey, the former Defence Secretary, resigned last week, and Al Khan's, the Armed Forces Minister, resigned last week, had an answer to that. And we need to see what happens in the coming months, because otherwise somebody else needs to do the job.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, isn't it? And we have to be careful, as you've highlighted. The by-election, the polling is still polling stations is the phrase I'm looking for, still open until 10. So we have to be a little bit careful about what we say. But I do want to pick up on the issue of defence, because I think for many, many years, and I don't want to apportion blame really, but I think there's been a challenge, hasn't there, politically? Because let's be honest, defence isn't sexy for voters, right? That's my view. It's not. You know, what benefit do I get out of it? You know, I'm not. You know, it's not about me paying less tax or whatever. It doesn't mean I can get a cheaper, or rather an easier hospital appointment or whatever. It's really hard, I think, if you're a politician of any political party, to sell the idea of defence being well resourced and well supported to the electorate, because I think for a lot of voters, it's not really a priority. They see it as a given, actually, that whichever government's in power will be protecting them. But it has become very clear that whoever's been in power, they've really taken their eye off the ball, and it's actually reached a crisis point. And now we are seeing in the polls, certainly the polling that I look at, in terms of issues that matter to voters, defence going up the list as a priority.
Well, as it should be. Yeah. I mean, we've got a war in the Middle East. We've got war in Europe. The world is gradually descending into chaos and becoming a much more dangerous place. It's only a few years ago we all got kicked out of Afghanistan by a terrorist regime. I mean, these are really difficult times, and of course it should be. I mean, I'll tell you something, if defence goes wrong, it goes up the priority list and voters suddenly notice about it. It's like your insurance policy. You don't like paying for it, but blimey, you know, when something, if your house burns down, you want to be able to claim that insurance back. You know, it's as simple as that. And I'm afraid, yes, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's not just Labour. Labour are under the spotlight at the moment because they're absolutely dropping the ball on this issue. But the Conservatives, 14 years of government really did nothing apart from, I mean, I've sat through defence reviews from the Conservatives where our military was downsized and downgraded, and it's a scandal, really. And we believed this end of history nonsense at the end of the Cold War from, I think it's Francis Fukuyama, the academic who wrote it, and this idea that we got some sort of peace dividend. Well, the peace dividend's over, and unfortunately we're going to have to find the money to pay for it.
David, final thing I'm keen to get your thoughts on tonight here on Talk is the bosses of the world's leading AI companies, artificial intelligence companies, who are saying to leaders of the G7, listen, you need to come up with a way to govern artificial intelligence. And there's this kind of feeling here from these AI bosses. Well, I think it's twofold. It's almost like, one, you need to work out how you're going to make this work in your country in terms of governing artificial intelligence, because, the progress has been made is vast. So there's one aspect of it. And the other aspect of it is the impact this is going to have on your society in your country, because AI will replace hundreds of thousands of jobs. And I think this is really interesting. And we've spoken to a couple of people tonight about this. And my real sense is that people don't really understand what's coming down the tracks, including these G7 leaders.
Well, I completely agree. I saw an interview with Peter Kyle when he was still the science secretary or whatever, or tech secretary, where it was in House magazine. We all ignored it. I saw it a bit too late, to be honest. But he said, well, it's okay, politicians won't be out of a job. Well, we'll see about that, actually, because, I mean, you can see literally everything. I tell my colleagues, actually my younger colleagues, that go out and find your own stories. Find stuff that's off the beaten track, because in a few years' time, AI will be able to do the on-diary stuff quite easily instead of you. go and find the exclusives. That's the only way to survive in this business. And it's, it's true of so many professions. I mean, I could see government jobs. Look at the NHS, the cost of the NHS. How much of GP work can be replaced by AI? How much of, outside, look at lawyers and solicitors.
Yeah, I look at vast chunks of the civil service, right? Civil servants could be replaced multiple times by this kind of technology.
We are not going to see anything. We haven't seen anything like this since Britain was at the forefront of the Industrial Revolution and the weavers were protesting outside. I mean, I kid you not. I mean, it's going to be massive stuff. I mean, I worry. My son, is just hit in the workplace. I worry for his generation because they're gonna have to look at what jobs there are in the future, and it's going to change quite dramatically.
Tell him to train as a plumber, because I can never see AI driving around in a van with a bit of U-bend in the back and getting on its knees and fixing someone's loo.
No, it'll probably be beneath AI, actually. We'll probably have a new kind of snobbery on AI, but yeah.
Listen, always a pleasure. Thanks for your time. David Maddox, political editor of The Independent, here on the Evening Exchange at Talk. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Why do I keep giving you that number? Because so many of you want to get involved in what we're chewing over tonight, particularly about whether or not there is any argument for a return of capital punishment in this country. We used to have it. It was suspended in 1965 and then permanently ended in 1969. And once again, if you just put us on YouTube or you've put us on the radio or your smart speaker and you're thinking, why are you talking about this? I've always taken the view there's no place for it in a civilised society, but the case today and what we've heard about this young baby who was murdered by his father and another man who adopted him, his adoptive parents, and the things that Jamie Varley did to this young baby really shakes my resolve that we shouldn't have the death penalty. And that's one of the things we're chewing over tonight because we want to take the temperature of the nation. We'll get to more of your calls on that. 0344 499 1000 if you want to be one of those. The conversation continues next here at Talk.
We've actually put up with half a century of being told that somehow our national flag is a symbol of oppression. Now, I think if Oxfordshire do this, they'll find themselves completely and utterly defied. People will literally justify this. And you know what? If people have moved to this country and they don't like our flag, I've got a really simple idea. Go back to where you came from.
Do you ever fear about being arrested because of the socks you wear, Nigel Farage?
Well, I do. You want to see the underpants? Oh, dear, no.
There's the thought. Wow.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
In case you hadn't realised, the 2026 World Cup has officially kicked off. Here at Talk, we are celebrating in style. How do you fancy getting your hands on a massive £26,000 in tax-free cash? Imagine what you could do with all of that cash, all of that money, if you could do with a boost to your bank balance this summer. Then here are the details on how to enter.
For your chance to win, visit talk.tv/win or text TALK to 83338 by 6 p.m. on the 20th of July 2026. Texts cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or send your name and number by post to Comp 1 PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by midnight on the 23rd of July 2026. 18 plus, UK residents only. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talk.tv/win.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Duncan Barkes. Let's get a load of your calls on the air. This is Stuart in London. Hello, Stuart.
Good evening. Love the show. Very, very interesting.
Thank you.
I believe that there should be, it's not up to politicians. I think there should be a referendum on the reintroduction of the death penalty.
A referendum. So we asked the people of this nation whether or not we should have capital punishment back.
Exactly. And I think everybody I spoke to wants it. There's some people who are so evil, so wicked, like the ones that killed Lee Rigby, chopped his head off in the street. Yep. There's no doubt whatsoever they've done it. We cannot use circumstantial evidence. It must be 100% proof. Witnesses, CCTV, DNA, whatever. So there's no possible fault. And we really need, I want it back because hopefully it will act as a deterrent. If it doesn't, well, the cost of keeping these people alive is £500,000 every 10 years. And as they get older, the cost is going to go up and up and up. And the people that don't want the death penalty, I think they should pay an extra 10% of their salary towards keeping these people alive.
Well, ultimately, though, if I can ask you this, Stuart, is it about saving money, saving the taxpayer cash for you, or is it about deterring future crimes like this heinous crime that we've been forced to talk about tonight?
Well, I've worked a lot. We've worked a lot with people that were in trouble. What I found is you can rehabilitate any criminal. We worked a lot. Sergeant Dan was a local.
Sorry, you said you believe you can rehabilitate any criminal?
You can rehabilitate any criminal.
Yeah.
I don't talk about sex offenders or people like that. Criminal. I'll give you an example. Neighbourhood watch meeting. The sergeant who's the head of it, he says, since Stuart took these two lads boxing, he said, I can only say the change in them has been nothing short of miraculous.
Okay.
They have never done a thing wrong. But you cannot rehabilitate paedophiles. Look at Jimmy Sapp. You cannot, Gary Glitter. You cannot rehabilitate people like this. Why are we keeping them alive? Why? I mean, they are evil beyond understanding. We don't want these people.
All right, you make a good point, and I think it's a point that many people will agree with, Stuart. Thank you for sharing it with us. We'll put it out there to the audience. This is Louis, who's in Derby. Hello, Louis.
Hi there. I totally agree on that previous caller. I think these children that get killed, women that get raped, young girls, and there's no going back from that. I think in reasonable doubt, when it goes to a high court, they get prison for 10 years, and it's proven in reasonable doubt, and they should be on a death row. They should be on death penalty. It will be proper justice, because you say previously that people that get convicted, these evil people, these evil crimes, they get life, but they don't. They get put on a chance of bail, and it's all about their human rights. What about the victims? What about the victims' families?
Yeah, I mean, in this particular case, the judge has made it very clear that the whole life order sentence is of last resort for cases of the most extreme gravity. The judge thought this was the case, and consequently, he'll never be eligible for parole. Jamie Varley. So it is genuinely life behind bars, as opposed to this life sentence of 21 years that is often handed to people. How far would you go then in terms of reintroducing the death penalty to this country? I mean, would you vote for a political party, and be a little bit careful when you talk about politics, because we have to work under very strict regulations during a by-election, which is currently underway. But I mean, is it for you? Well, let me ask you the question. Don't mention any political parties by name, but if a political party said, do you know what, one of our key policies is to reintroduce capital punishment, would you go, you're going to get my vote?
But as long as they, like the previous caller said, rapists, paedophiles, and horrid crimes that we've seen in recent weeks of what happened to that Henry Nowak. Video evidence of absolute atrocities that we can't believe that's happening on our UK street.
You know what? You make a really good point, because a lot of the chats we've had earlier tonight with people saying, well, there have been miscarriages of justice. You make a really good point. If there's video evidence, right, how can there be a miscarriage of justice? I mean, I don't want to sound brutal about it, but if you've got pictures, if you've got video of someone carrying out an horrific act of any form, surely that 100% proves that the person who's carried out that act or that murder or whatever is guilty, and therefore they've been caught bang to rights. Though the flip side of that, of course, is with the force of artificial intelligence, maybe we can't rely on what our eyes are seeing. Good call, Louis. Thank you. Anthony's in Manchester. Hello, Anthony.
Hello there, Duncan. Just a very quick story from 1964. We had an execution in Manchester, Strangeways, and I was 14 years of age, and it was fairly traumatic, the whole experience. I say, I'm a 14-year-old child going to school. What you have with an execution, you have all the appeals, you then have loads of people outside the prison, campaigning against it. And I remember going to bed, I think it was Monday morning, the execution. And I remember going to bed as a 14-year-old, just being grateful it's over, because it lasts for months. It's not just a simple execution and that's it. Because it's such a big thing, because the whole country's focused, on this one crime.
So did you actually witness this outside of Strangeways?
No, I was 14 years of age, but because we only had, how many channels would we have in 1964? It might only be one or two channels. Two channels. So the whole news was concentrated on this, on this execution, and it goes on for weeks. And then you have the appeal to the Home Secretary. Will the Home Secretary, grant clemency? And as I say, even as a 14-year-old, I'm not involved in it. I really was upset by it. So I don't think it's that, I don't think it's that easy just to execute. I think after a while, maybe you come numb to it, like in America. I suppose if you have one every 3 weeks, you get used to it. But we probably wouldn't be that way. We wouldn't be having, say, 20 executions a year. We'd probably have one a year. And it would, just be a horrible event. As I say, 14 years of age.
Understood. So ultimately, given what you've just said, is that your main reason for being against the reintroduction of capital punishment here?
I just think it's barbaric, really. I know the instant response, especially, with Henry Nowak and everything. I think your instant response is real vengeance, and I can understand that. But the after effects, having done it, I don't think we're any better for it. I don't think it's an evil act they've done, but I think we're just compounding it.
Yeah, and I mean, we also got to consider, and I'm just putting this point out there because I do find this debate genuinely fascinating. And Anthony in Manchester, thank you for your contribution. If we were to bring it back, that is a massive shift in our society, isn't it? It's a massive, massive shift. It's a massive change in our country. Steve sends a message, 0344 499 1000 to WhatsApp. Duncan, can I ask what has changed your mind on the death penalty now, as opposed to all of the other horrific acts that have occurred in the past, particularly against children? I fully support the death penalty and have a broader view that a certain ex-police officer should have been handed the death penalty for what he did. Well, I thought I explained it earlier, Steve, but maybe not well enough. I've always had the view that we shouldn't give the state the power to kill its own people, right? I don't trust politicians, I don't trust governments, right, of any political colour. I've worked in politics, I've seen them all, right? You know, once they get a sniff of power, they become addicted to it. And I do not trust any government to have the right to kill its own people. And I think bolted onto that is the view that if you say, well, it's okay to kill someone in the name of justice for this crime, then it starts to include other crimes quite quickly, right? So that's always been my view, and you might disagree with it, Steve. But this particular case, and I think it was I read a couple of graphic descriptions of what they put this 13-month-old boy through, this baby boy, and it literally was that shook that shook my resolve that we shouldn't have capital punishment. So I hope I've answered your question. I mean, I'll be honest with you, the other time was when I read the report about James Bolger, who was the toddler who was murdered by two other boys in Merseyside a couple of decades ago now. And sometimes you read stuff that you can never unread, and it detailed what they did to James Bolger. And that was another moment when I thought, do you know what, sometimes, and this is really complex because you're talking about young boys who killed a younger boy, you start thinking, well, can people like that ever be rehabilitated? It's complex, Steve. I hope I've answered your question. If I haven't, forgive me, I've tried my best. Bride in Manchester says, I'd happily hang the pair of them myself. That poor little boy. I've got 2 grandchildren myself, a similar age, and they're my world. I adore them. This story upsets me so much. Hand them over to 50 women in a room who can't have children, says Brian in Manchester. I'll do one more here from Lorraine, who says, whilst this barbaric murderer of baby Preston will hopefully never leave prison, if we are talking about the death sentence, where do we draw the line? For example, Sarah Sharif suffered a torturous, long drawn-out death from a sadistic animal, yet he did not get a life sentence. Would he therefore be exempt from the death penalty? Keep your messages coming in, 0344 499 1000. I pledge to you, before I go off air at 10, and Andre and Ash take over at 10, we'll have a good chunk of time to go through more of your calls and more of your messages. But up next, we're going to talk about something that I thought was kind of interesting. Age gap relationships, right? It used to be a thing, you know, a woman who married a younger man or vice versa. According to new data, it is not a thing anymore. And I just thought tonight, a little bit of light relief, because I think we need it from time to time. Tell me, how big is the age gap in your relationship? And does an age gap matter? And at what point does it become a little bit weird? We'll get into that next, here at Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now, with the World Cup in full swing, TalkSport and Meantime have teamed up to create So Good Lager, which will be poured from all O'Neill's pubs and some of the best sports pubs across the United Kingdom. You can find your nearest boozer and pub by visiting talksport.com/so-good. Of course, you need to be over 18, and as always, please drink responsibly. It's the home of common sense. I'm Duncan Barkes. This is Talk. Let's get into this relationship story, which I think is rather interesting. A load of data's come out, and one of the things that we've discovered from the Office for National Statistics is that there's an era-defining change. And this era-defining change is about the fact that people who eventually decide to get married, and they're waiting longer, generations beneath mine are waiting longer to get hitched now, but when they do, they're more likely than ever to be of a similar age. I'll just give you some comparison. The median back in 2001 was for the groom to be 2 years older. The new normal is for him to be just 1 year older. But it also appears that big gaps of age are no longer fashionable. The proportion of marriages where the groom was at least a decade his bride's senior has dropped from almost 12% to 7.5% in the past 25 years. Likewise, the likelihood of a bride 10 years older or more has gone from a rare 2.5% to a vanishing 1.3%. I'm going to declare an interest here. I am married to, all right, let's guess. Am I married to a woman who is much older than me or much younger? What do we think, people behind the glass? I can't hear anyone. You think younger, James. You think older. What do you think? You think older? I am currently married to a woman. Just so you're clear, I am married to a woman who is 7 years older. So I'm interested in this for all kinds of reasons, and I won't go into the details of the life of the current Mrs. Barkes, but I would say, gentlemen, life's too short to marry a woman who's a lot younger than you. You really don't want the hassle. Let's get a view on this. This is Nadia Essex, relationship expert, who joins us. Good evening. Hello, are you there? My lovely, good to hear you and good to see you as well. What do you make of this bit of data that now reveals that age gaps that used to exist in marriages are no longer a thing?
Well, I don't think it's that surprising. I honestly think that marriage has become something that for women is almost undesirable in comparison to what it used to be back in the day. You know, you used to sort of from birth be told that, you know, getting married and settling down was the goal in life.
Yeah.
And it just isn't that anymore. With the growth of things like social media, with the growth of things like access to different generations, and seeing on TikTok, you know, older women who are not married, who are living their very best lives. I think younger women are reprioritizing marriage until they get a bit older, when you think, okay, I've got my career, I've you know, been on the holidays, I've been around the block, and now I want to settle down.
So are we saying that social media is to blame for the decline in marriage?
Well, no, I think it's the poor standards of men.
Okay. Well, this is interesting. I feel that I've got to go into bat for my fellow blokes. I mean, why do you believe the standards of men have dropped over the years? You do. You're nodding away. Why? What's the matter with them?
I think ultimately we were in a patriarchy, and I think that if you look at the state of the world, it's quite obvious that the patriarchy just doesn't work. You know, men aren't happy, women aren't happy. The society as a whole right now aren't happy. You've got, you know, the rise of, you know, the lonely men who are just, you know, getting lonelier and lonelier, but it's simply because they refuse to engage or be in any way interested in women and the things that women have to go through. You know, you just have to ask a man about his biggest fear on a first date, and that is usually that the woman walks in and she's fat. The biggest fear for a woman on a first date is that she gets murdered. You know, we're just living two completely different lives. And so, yeah, I think it's the bar of men is so low that actually if a man just took an interest in actually the female experience and knew a little bit about what women go through and how difficult it is for us, you know, day to day, the things we have to think about. Yeah. Men would be winning, but they just can't be bothered.
Well, you see, this is really interesting. And I mean, you know, obviously I've got a few years on you. So my dating experience, I mean, you know, well, it used to involve going to pubs, right? You know, and you meet a human being and you'd have a conversation, and you might say, would you like a drink? And if it was going nice, you might, this is not a euphemism, you might just go, should we go and get a kebab, right? You know, so online dating and anything of that kind of vibe is way off my radar, so I've got no idea. But I'm struck by something you say, and I think with the greatest of respect, it seems like you're blaming blokes for a lot of the problems here. And I'm a bloke, so I'm going to go into bat for blokes, but just a little bit, OK? Because I think you're partly right. It's never been easier with social media and the internet to find out what women want, right? I mean, there are dozens of websites, there are magazine articles all over the place. You know, if you're a bloke and you can't find a G-spot, you can go online and get a bloody map, right? It's never been easier. So are you just saying that we now live in a world where, despite that information being there, men are of such a low quality, such a low standard, that they don't even have it in them to go online and go, I'm going on a first date and I've worked out how I'm going to have a really nice, engaging evening, which means I'm going to get a second date?
Yeah, because I think, you know, the younger men certainly don't think like that. They don't go into a date thinking, what I put in, I get out.
Yeah.
They go into a date thinking, what's she bringing to the table? Can I get sex? Can we, you know, are we going to go 50-50? And the kind of young men, and I don't want to blame people like Andrew Tate and things like that, but it's like you're constantly, as a young man, I would have, from what I see anyway, from what I hear from people, is that you're seeing men being really loud on social media about you know, women being beneath them, and they're
Right.
you know, all that time, not then they're lower than them, and they're not worth.
Yeah, but they're not proper men,
But
are
actually,
they? They're not proper men. I mean, come on, that can't be the run
the
of the mill.
boys don't know that.
Right.
No, but the boys don't know that, and then it is about just men kind of taking a step back from like the manosphere and all the things that they're seeing online, and thinking to themselves, okay, this isn't, like you said, this is another human being. We're going on a date. I really want this to go well. What can I do to make sure this date goes well? And many men don't do that, and they don't even bother. I mean, the amount of people that will turn up on a first date as a man and will not even have like a clean top on, or you know, dirty shoes and things like that. And women, you know, if we're going on a date, 9 times out of 10 we've put a lot of effort and time into getting ready, makeup and all that. We're going on the date because we hope that there will be potential into a relationship for this. So it just, again, it's the difference in mindset of going on the date in the first place.
This chat, and it's an interesting one, it's gone off in a slightly different direction, because I did want to talk about age gaps in marriages and relationships and whether or not it matters. And I will ask you to specifically answer that before we wrap it up, because I'm interested in that. But you've taken it in a really interesting direction, because it's not a world that I've had any reason to be involved in. But, I mean, are men really that bloody useless now that they turn up on a first date, they can't be bothered to brush their teeth or wear something nice and shiny or polish their shoes? And, I mean, that just sets the tone, because that's massively disrespectful. I mean, is that widespread, that?
You just have to, I mean, go online and have a look. One of my girlfriends messaged me today, this morning.
Right.
She had 3 dates set up.
Yeah.
The first date, he didn't even bother asking her any questions on the date at all. She was absolutely, she might have been on it as well.
Well, let me just interrupt you. He wasn't a broadcaster, was he, by any chance? Because I'll tell you what, if you go on a date with a broadcaster, they will just talk about themselves, but go on.
Yeah. The second date, he didn't bother to, said yes, let's go out on the Friday, and then didn't even bother to make the plans or tell her where it was. So she was constantly having to chase, and then she was like, I'm going to give up. So she's like, I've got 1 date left. I'm already
let me just interrupt you about that, because I'm interested in that, because I know blokes who wouldn't want to be seen to be too dictatorial, saying you need to be here at this time and this is what we're doing, because they think that would be a turn-off. Are you saying that actually that's what the majority of women expect and want?
Well, who told them it's a turn-off? This is what men have been doing for it's called courting.
Courting? I've not heard that expression for years.
Yes, this is, I mean, what the heck is wrong with people? Of course. You know, there's nothing more
something out of a
romantic.
Jane Austen novel.
But it's lovely. If a man says to me, right, Friday night, 7:30, I'm going to, you know, a taxi will pick you up. We're going for a lovely dinner. This is the dress code. Be there. Da, da, da. It's wonderful. It feels romantic. Women, it's not about the money, it's about the effort.
Yes.
And the only way you know if a man is really interested in you is if the effort that he's going to put into you. Because many, many men will go on a date and have absolutely no intention of seeing you again, but just to pass the time, because he'd rather be with a woman out in a restaurant than sitting at home by himself.
Okay.
And we don't know that as women. The only way you can tell if a man really likes you is the effort he puts into you. So if he can't be bothered to put any effort into you, then already that's a red flag.
Understood. Let's just wrap up this fascinating chat and talk about age gaps. Do you think age gaps matter in any kind of relationship?
Yeah, I mean, I personally love an age gap.
Right.
I think age gaps are great.
What direction, older or younger?
I think men older and younger women, because I think that men mature later, and so there's more synergy. Not too much. A woman in her 20s and a man in her 50s has got nothing in common, let's be real. You know, the woman in her 20s doesn't know a life before the internet existed. A man in his 50s does. They grew up in very different times.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm 44 and I wouldn't date anybody younger than me.
You're resolute on that, aren't you? Listen, Nadia, it's been fascinating in more ways than one. Thank you. Nadia Essex, relationship expert. I found that a bit of a revelation, actually. We should have done this earlier in the show so we could get a few more dating calls on the air. I'm kind of sitting here just going, I'll tell you what, if the current Mrs. Barkes decides she's had enough, and who wouldn't blame her, I wouldn't get back on the dating scene. I'll just get myself a Labrador, sit in the pub. This is Talk.
We've actually put up with half a century of being told that somehow our national flag is a symbol of oppression. Now, I think if Oxford should do this, they'll find themselves completely and utterly defied. People will literally justify this. And you know what? If people have moved to this country and they don't like our flag, I've got a really simple idea. Go back to where you came from.
Do you ever fear about being arrested because of the socks you wear, Nigel Farage?
Well, I do. You want to see the underpants? Oh, dear, no.
There's the thought. Wow.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
I'm Duncan Barkes. This is Talk. Andre and Ash here after 10 when I knock it on the head. Let's get some of your voice notes on the air. This is Mike.
Why can't we just acquire an island, build a super jail, or put them on that island? Yeah, and while we're at it, we're talking about the death penalty. No. People like paedophiles, rapists, and things like that, especially repeat people, why can't we just surgically get them castrated? Leave the ECHR, forget the human rights and all that. They strip the rights of others so they can be humiliated. And then that way, they'll have plenty of time to think about what they've really done.
It's an interesting suggestion. First one we've had tonight about chemical or surgical castration for people who carry out sex offences. Thank you, Mike, for that. This is Scott.
I'm not too sure about the death penalty being brought back, but I 100% believe corporal punishment should be brought back. I think if people were seen to be receiving maybe like 100 lashes in the town square for rape or burglary or something like that, I think it would really discourage other offenders.
Yeah, I mean, I come back to, oh, blimey, why? Why did you have to send that in, Scott? Now I'm really perplexed because I'm finding myself thinking, I can't think of anything worse of being in a country of corporal punishment. And believe me, there's quite a few people like to thrash. I mean, I've got a list of them, starting with cyclists who jump red lights. I mean, where do you start with corporal punishment? But the idea that we start thrashing people for certain crimes, I don't know, I'm a bit perplexed by that, because I don't know what I think now. That's the beauty of doing this kind of show here on Talk. Do you remember there was a case, a good couple of decades ago now, I think it was Singapore. It wasn't Hong Kong, it was Singapore. And there was an American teenager who he got basically nicked for dropping chewing gum, and they were going to thrash him, because that's one of the crimes. If you drop chewing gum in Singapore, you basically get a bamboo cane over your backside. And there was a lot of outrage. I mean, 1994, it was Singapore, was it? Yeah. He was lashed 6 times with a cane. He was an American, wasn't he, I think, because it hit the headlines in the West. People just saying, well, it divided the nation, because some people just went, we shouldn't be thrashing people for dropping chewing gum, and other people are going, get in there, give him more. Scott, it's a great message, thank you, because now I'm going to be driving home later thinking, I'm not entirely sure what I think now about corporal punishment. This is James in Exeter. Hello, James, welcome.
Hello, how are you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. What would you like to say, sir?
Just a quick one. A really, really interesting conversation about the death penalty. There's one of your arguments that you made, I just find it quite weak and not very convincing, about the fact that there's a risk of the state abusing that power. You're giving the state too much power, are you giving them the right to kill? I just struggle to see how that's going to happen. How is that going to go beyond murder? How is that going to go beyond rape? I get it. Someone like Ed Miliband could say, OK, we're going to kill people for sort of violating net zero. You know, I'm no fan of big government. But I just struggle to see how that could happen. And surely they'll just be booted out of the next election.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, I think my concern, and if it's my concern that you're picking up on, is I simply don't trust politicians of any political stripe, really, with massive amounts of power. And that's rooted in me, predominantly as a broadcaster and a journalist, and in the past a campaigner. But do you think I'm over-egging the pudding here?
Yeah, I just think that there's no way a government can put a convincing argument to the public that, OK, we need to bring in the death penalty for another reason besides murder or something horrific. Again, I agree with what all the previous callers have been saying. If it's video evidence, that's a good reason for it. And then if it gets a bit murky, then, yeah, perhaps it should just be prison.
Yeah, no, you make an interesting point. I suppose I'd counter it by saying I never thought we would have massive chunks of our freedom and liberty constrained in this country in the way that we saw during the COVID pandemic. And they changed their minds pretty bloody quickly and took away a load of our rights at the drop of a hat.
I would agree with that. No, I think it's been a disgrace with the whole social media crackdown as well. So, no, I 100% get where you're coming from on that one.
Yeah, do you see what I mean? I mean, sometimes they can just flip and start deciding that they think they know what's good for us. Anyway, that's a really good call, James. I'm glad you made it. I think you're a new caller to Talk, so call again soon. And thank you for your excellent contribution. Let's lighten the load a little bit at the end of the show. Let's talk about dating. And we were talking earlier about age gaps in relationships with relationships expert Nadia Essex, and she went off on a slightly different tangent about basically how crap men are when it comes to dating. This is Scott, who's in Nottingham. Hello, Scott.
Hiya.
Hi, what would you like to say, mate?
Yeah, what the lady was saying. We're not all bad. And a lot of men, I don't think a lot of men get married now or get too involved. It's to do with like being kicked out and stuff like that.
Go on.
It's like, you know what I mean, a lot of men, there's a lot of homeless men on the street, single, you know what I mean, who from, the women always seem to get the houses. It's not all good for men, like the lady was making out.
If you don't mind me making the observation, you sound like a man who's speaking from experience.
Yeah, I'm 52, you know what I mean? I've had my black bags chucked on the lawn and stuff like that, and yeah, not always my fault, but get kids involved. I mean, sometimes I've had to do the right thing myself and leave the house with the kids and stuff. You know what I mean? But yeah, it's not all bad. I mean, we don't all turn up. I've been on dates. I don't turn up scruffy. If someone turns up scruffy, they're not bothering anyway. You know what I mean? So.
What was it? The comments that Nadia made that made you pick up the phone? Did you think she was just too one-sided against blokes?
Yeah. We're not all bad. Like, there's good and bad in everybody, isn't there? We're male, female, whatever. We're not all bad. It's not all down to men. There's some crazy women out there, if you don't mind me saying.
No, you can say pretty much what you like. And I mean, if you don't mind me asking, are you currently? I was going to use the term "looking for love." Forgive me, that's an awful cliche. But are you currently dating?
Yeah, I'm always dating, but I live on my own.
Yeah.
And it's the lady I'm seeing. She lives alone as well, and it's just best that way because you never know what's going to happen. I think a lot of it's pressure from society as well now. Everyone, you've got to pay the bills, so people stay together for convenience and that. But I try and stay independent now because I can't afford to be on the streets. I'm lucky that I've landed on my feet, but not a lot of men do. Same with women as well. Women get kicked out as well, so it's not all one-sided for men like that as well.
No, it's not. You're right. And if I can ask, I mean, because you sound an older bloke, if you don't mind me saying that in that way.
I'm 52.
52. So, I mean, have you noticed, because I think you kind of mentioned that, you've been in previous relationships or whatever, and now you've got a partner and you have been dating. Have you noticed a change in how it kind of works over the years?
Oh, yeah, it's so different. I mean, I've got boys of 19 and 16, and the fear of saying something wrong to a female where it could be, taken the wrong way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was different in my day. I went to school in the 80s and stuff, and it was all right to tell a girl you fancied her. But nowadays, it can be triggered and all sorts. It's a strange world now.
No, I think I share your view. I mean, some of the stories I hear, and I'm not on the dating scene, but, if I ever ended up looking for a partner, I mean, it just seems like an absolute minefield compared to when I was I was going to use the term a lad, but when I was a younger bloke where social media really wasn't a thing, you go to the pub and there might be someone there you quite liked. You might look at them a bit and they'd look back and they might smile. You think, well, I'll buy them a beer. And then nature took its course. Great call, Scott. Thank you, Scott in Nottingham. I'm pretty much done and dusted with After 10. Ash is here to tell us more. Hello.
Good evening. How's your show been, man? Because you can't talk about anything, can you?
No, but you can in about 90 seconds' time.
The polls are closing. We'll come up with all the latest data and who's going to be the MP. So we're coming up with that. We've got Sebastian Salek on.
Oh, yeah.
He's a Labour councillor commentator.